An infertile billionaire woke up to triplets outside his door in a basket on his 40th birthday. The rise of Chief Emeka. In the bustling, vibrant chaos of Onitsha main market, the air buzzed with the smell of dried fish, fresh yam tubers, and the sharp tang of palm oil. Here, a young boy named Emeka Nwankwo learned early on that surviving meant more than just being strong. It meant dreaming big. Born in 1986 to a humble Igbo family, Emeka was the third of 5 kids. His dad, Papa Nwankwo, hustled as a petty trader, selling spare parts for Okada motorcycles from a tiny wooden stall. He woke up before dawn and came home after dark, his feet aching and hands calloused. Meanwhile, his mom, Mama Neka, sold veggies under a faded umbrella, her voice cutting through the market noise as she greeted customers with warm smiles and savvy bargaining skills. Life was tough. School fees were always late, and new clothes only showed up at Christmas. Meat? That was a treat saved for Sundays or when a relative sent some cash from the city. But Emeka was different. Even as a little guy, his eyes sparkled with a quiet fire. While other kids kicked a ball around in the red dirt or chased lizards under mango trees, Emeka sat on an upturned crate next to his dad's stall, soaking in the hustle and bustle. He watched how some traders thrived while others barely scraped by. He listened to stories about Lagos, oil money, and men who started with nothing and ended up with everything. At night, under the flickering light of a kerosene lantern, he read his worn-out school textbooks over and over, dreaming of a world beyond the Niger River. When he turned 10, tragedy struck. Papa Nwankwo fell seriously ill with malaria. Hospital bills wiped out their savings, and the stall shut down for weeks. Food became scarce. Emeka, the quiet dreamer, stepped up. He began helping his mom at her vegetable stand after school, stacking tomatoes in perfect pyramids and charming customers with his polite, "Auntie, buy from us na," doubling sales on the days he was there. Every kobo he earned went into an old Milo tin buried under the mango tree behind their mud brick house. By the time he got into the University of Lagos to study business administration, Emeka had already tasted both hunger and hope. His WAC results were stellar, straight A's in commerce, economics, and mathematics. But the family couldn't afford Unilag fees. Giving up wasn't in his nature. He hopped on a night bus to Lagos, clutching a small Ghana Must-Go bag with 2 shirts, 1 pair of trousers, and an unshakable determination. Lagos hit him hard. The endless traffic, towering buildings, and the smell of the lagoon mixed with exhaust fumes. He crashed in uncompleted buildings at first, working as a bus conductor on the 3rd mainland bridge route, saving every naira he could. He wrote letters to churches, applied for scholarships, and attended free entrepreneurship seminars. One day, at a small business workshop in Yaba, he met a kind-hearted lecturer who saw something special in the skinny, intense young man from Onitsha. This lecturer helped him land a partial scholarship and a part-time job tutoring secondary school students. Emeka grabbed every chance he got. He graduated with a first-class degree at the top of his class. Oil companies came calling, but he turned down comfy salaries. He wanted more. With borrowed cash from a cooperative society and years of savings, he kicked off a small fuel trading business, buying petrol and diesel in bulk from depots and supplying filling stations. He worked 18-hour days, crashing in his tiny office in Apapa when deliveries ran late. Every profit went back into the business, and he expanded into logistics and then real estate as Lagos boomed. The big break came in his late 20s when he scored a major contract to supply diesel to a multinational construction firm building the Lekki Ikoyi Link Bridge. Emeka delivered flawlessly, under budget and ahead of schedule. Word spread, and soon more contracts followed. He diversified into tech startups, solving mobile payment issues for market women like his mom and property developments in emerging areas of Abuja and Port Harcourt. By 35, Forbes Africa had him listed among the continent's youngest billionaires. His company, Nwankwo Group, employed thousands. He built schools in Onitsha, hospitals in rural Anambra, and scholarship programs that sent hundreds of village kids to university. He bought his parents a beautiful house in Enugu, complete with generators and boreholes. Mama Neka cried when she saw her new kitchen with shiny tiles and a gas cooker. Papa Nwankwo, now retired, sat on the veranda daily, telling anyone who would listen, "My son Emeka, he suffered with us. But look where God has taken him." Yet, in quiet moments, driving alone through the glittering streets of Victoria Island or standing on the balcony of his Ikoyi penthouse watching the Atlantic waves crash, Emeka felt a hollow ache. All the money in the world couldn't erase the memory of childhood hunger or the deeper wound from a tragic bicycle accident years ago. He had risen from dust to diamonds, but the higher he climbed, the more he felt the one thing his wealth could never buy: a child to call his own, a legacy to carry the Nwankwo name beyond his lifetime. He smiled in public, shook hands at galas, and donated millions to orphanages with genuine compassion. But at night, when the city quieted and the weight of solitude pressed down, Emeka whispered a prayer into the darkness. God, you've given me more than I ever dreamed. But please, let there be someone to inherit it all. Let my story not end with me. Little did he know, destiny was already weaving threads that would one day answer that prayer in the most unexpected way. The tragic accident. The year was 1998, and the Harmattan wind blew dry and fierce through the village of Onitsha, coating everything in a fine red dust. Emeka Nwankwo was 12, thin but wiry, with legs made for running and a smile that could charm even the sternest market woman. School had just resumed after the Christmas break, and the boys in his street had formed a new gang they proudly called the Flying Eagles. Their pride and joy were their bicycles, second-hand Raleighs and Phoenixes patched together with wire and hope, passed down from older brothers or bought with savings from hawking pure water. Emeka's own bike was a battered black one his dad had bought from a mechanic for 2,000 naira. The brakes barely worked, the chain slipped often, and the seat was torn, exposing sharp springs that bit into his thighs on long rides. But to Emeka, it was freedom. On that bike, he could outrun the poverty that clung to his family like a second skin. He could imagine flying away from the mud brick house with its leaky zinc roof, away from the nights when dinner was only Gary and groundnut, away from the worry in his mother's eyes whenever school fees were due. That Saturday afternoon, the sun blazed high and merciless. Emeka and his friends, Chikwudi, Ifani, Obinna, and little Nonso, who always trailed behind, gathered at the top of Yumud Hill, a steep, rocky path leading down toward the banks of the Niger River. The challenge was simple but dangerous. Who could ride down the hill fastest without touching the brakes? The loser would fetch water for the others from the borehole for a whole week. The older boys went first. Cheers erupted as they sped down, weaving between stones and potholes, dust clouds rising behind them like smoke. Emeka watched, heart pounding with excitement and a little fear. When it was his turn, the boys slapped his back and chanted his name. Emeka? Emeka. He felt invincible. He climbed onto the torn seat, gripped the rusty handlebars, and pushed off. For the first few seconds, it was pure joy. The wind rushed past his ears, cooling the sweat on his face. The world blurred, green mango leaves, red earth, distant shouts. He pedaled harder, faster, determined to beat Chikwidi's time. The bike rattled violently beneath him. He laughed out loud, a wild, free sound he rarely made. The race down Yumud Hill was a tradition for Emeka and his buddies, a wild mix of speed and dust flying everywhere. On this sunny day, laughter filled the air, echoing the carefree spirit of 12-year-old boys. Emeka, leading the charge on his beloved Raleigh bike, felt like he owned the world. But just like that, disaster struck. His front wheel hit a sharp stone lurking in the dust, and suddenly, the handlebars slipped from his grip. The chain slipped, the pedals locked up, and the bike swerved hard toward a cluster of jagged rocks. There was no time to jump. The bike flipped, sending him flying over the handlebars. The impact was brutal. A sickening crunch rang in his ears, followed by a wave of white-hot pain shooting through him. He tried to scream, but only a choked gasp escaped. Blood soaked through his shorts, warm and spreading fast. The world spun as he heard his friends shouting in panic, their voices distant and muffled. Emeka! Emeka! Jesus! Blood day everywhere. Curled up on the ground, clutching himself, tears streamed down his face. The pain was beyond anything he had ever felt. He rocked back and forth, praying for it to stop, praying for his mother. Mama Neka came running, her face twisted in terror at the sight of the blood. She fell to her knees, cradling his head in her lap. Nwam, my son, what happened? Papa Nwankwo arrived soon after, his face pale. With help from neighbors, they carried Emeka on a makeshift stretcher to the village clinic. The doctor, a kind but overworked man, examined him in a dim room that smelled of disinfectant and fear. Outside, Mama Neka clutched her rosary, whispering prayers through her sobs. When the doctor finally emerged, his expression was serious. "The injuries are severe," he said quietly. "Both testicles are crushed beyond repair. There's massive internal bleeding. If we don't operate immediately, he will die." Mama Neka let out a wail that echoed through the clinic. Papa Nwankwo staggered as if he'd been hit. "Operate how?" he whispered. "We no get money for big hospital." The doctor shook his head. "We must remove both testicles to stop the bleeding and save his life. There's no other choice. He's only 12, but this is the only way." In that moment, their world crumbled. With trembling hands, they signed the consent forms, borrowing money from anyone who could help. Drifting in and out of consciousness, Emeka caught snippets of conversation, words like remove, never have children, permanent. He didn't fully understand, only that something precious was being taken from him forever. When Emeka woke after the surgery, weak and bandaged, his mother was at his bedside, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She held his hand tightly. "My son," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You will live. That's all that matters. God will make a way." But even at 12, Emeka knew a part of him had died that day. As he lay recovering, staring at the cracked ceiling, he made a silent vow. The pain in his body would heal. The scar would remain hidden. But he wouldn't let this accident define him. He would rise so high that no one would ever look at him with pity again. He would build an empire. He would show the world that a boy who lost everything on a dusty hill could still conquer mountains. Yet deep down, a seed of sorrow took root, a quiet, aching fear that no amount of money could ever fill the emptiness left behind. The boy who once dreamed of bicycles now carried a wound no one could see, a wound that would shape every relationship and every lonely night for the rest of his life. That terrible afternoon was just the beginning of a much longer journey, one that would one day lead to an unexpected miracle, wrapped in a woven basket on his doorstep. As Emeka Nwankwo's star rose in the Nigerian sky, so did the shadows that followed him. By his early 30s, his name was synonymous with success. Billboards in Lagos featured his face, advertising his mobile banking app, Nwankwo Pay, money moves faster. His oil company powered half the generators in the country. Luxury estates bearing his name sprang up across the city. Forbes Africa dubbed him the quiet billionaire. But with every new zero added to his net worth, the whispers grew louder. It started in small circles among the elite of Lagos. A woman would lean close to her friend at a party, her voice low. "You know Emeka Nwankwo? So handsome, so rich, yet no wife, no child. Something's not right." Another would nod knowingly. "I heard he sacrificed his manhood for the wealth." The rumor spread like wildfire. In beer parlors and at bus stops, people debated it openly. "That Nwankwo guy, he can't have children. He went to a native doctor in his village and traded his future for billions." Market women in Balagan had their own version. "He sold his manhood to marine spirits. That's why his business grows every day." Even pastors used him as a cautionary tale. From the pulpit, one televangelist thundered, "Some of you are chasing money. You don't know what some rich men have traded away. They have empty mansions and private jets that fly them to loneliness." Emeka heard every version. His drivers reported conversations from fuel queues. His assistant showed him gossip blogs with headlines like 10 Nigerian billionaires who allegedly used juju for wealth. Social media was the worst. Instagram pages posted side-by-side photos. Emeka in a tailored suit, next to grainy images of village shrines. The captions read, "From zero to hero, but at what cost? No wife, no child at 35. Think twice before you envy." Each rumor was like a fresh knife to his old wound. Late at night, in the silence of his vast mansion, Emeka would stand on his balcony, gripping the cold marble railing. Below him, Lagos glittered, a city he had helped build. His companies employed thousands of fathers who could now pay school fees. His foundations fed orphans and covered hospital bills for strangers. He had turned his pain into purpose. Yet the city that celebrated him in the daytime judged him in the dark. He was a hero in the boardroom, but a myth, a ghost story, in the streets. The world saw a billionaire, a titan of industry. They didn't see the 12-year-old boy on a dusty hill, whose life changed in a single, brutal moment. They didn't see the man who carried that secret pain every single day. The man who built an empire to prove his worth, only to be told his success was the result of a dark, sinister sacrifice. The public perception was a prison of gold. Every accolade, every new achievement, only seemed to confirm the rumors in the minds of the people. The more he built, the more they whispered. The higher he climbed, the more they believed he must have sold his soul to get there. The tragic irony was that the truth was far more human and painful than any myth they could invent. His fortune wasn't built on a dark ritual, but on the fierce determination of a wounded boy who vowed that the world would see his strength, not his scars. And so he stood alone on his balcony, the king of a city that didn't truly know him at all. Some nights, he wept quietly, his face buried in his hands, shoulders shaking. Not loud, dramatic tears. Emeka Nwankwo wasn't about that. These were deep, silent sobs that came from a place no amount of money could touch. He remembered the hospital bed in Onitsha, the smell of antiseptic, his mother's trembling hand holding his as the doctor explained what had been lost forever. He thought back to being 12, innocent, and how one moment on a bicycle had stolen his future children before they were even a thought. "Why, God?" he whispered into the night breeze. "I never asked for this. I didn't go to any babalawo. I didn't drink blood or bury anything under a tree. It was just an accident. A stupid accident. Why do they have to turn my pain into a curse?" He felt the weight of being misunderstood heavier than the burden of his billions. People envied his cars, his houses, his influence, but no one envied the emptiness in his king-sized bed, the untouched nursery he had built in hope during his first marriage, or the birthdays he spent alone, without little voices singing, "Happy birthday, Daddy." Friends tried to comfort him. His closest buddy, Chike, a childhood friend turned lawyer, would sit with him in the study, pouring expensive whiskey neither of them really tasted. "Brothers, ignore them," Chike would say. "It's just jealousy. You work hard, you win big. They don't get it." But Emeka would shake his head slowly. "It's not just jealousy, Chike. They think I chose this. They think I looked at fatherhood and said, 'No, I'd rather have private jets.' As if any man would make that trade. As if I don't lie awake imagining what my son's laugh would sound like, or how it would feel to carry my own daughter on my shoulders." He attended weddings and naming ceremonies with a smile plastered on, clapping as new fathers danced with their babies strapped to their backs in colorful ankara. Inside, something twisted. He gave extravagant gifts, envelopes thick enough to cover a year's rent, gold jewelry for the child, but drove home to silence. One evening, after a particularly vicious blog post went viral claiming he had buried 7 cows in the Atlantic for wealth, Emeka broke down completely. He dismissed the house staff early, locked himself in his private chapel, a beautiful room with stained glass windows depicting the prodigal son, and fell to his knees on the prayer rug his mother had woven for him years ago. He cried like the 12-year-old boy he once was. "God," he sobbed aloud, his voice echoing off the walls. "I accept what happened to me. I've never blamed you. But please, don't let them turn my suffering into something evil. Don't let the world believe I sold my soul when all I ever did was survive." He stayed there until dawn, forehead pressed to the cool floor, praying for peace, understanding, and a future where his story wouldn't be reduced to cruel gossip. And though the rumors continued to swirl through Lagos like smoke that never quite clears, Emeka carried on. He built higher walls around his heart, smiled wider in public, and worked harder because work was the one place where pain couldn't follow him. But deep inside, in the quiet chamber where hope still flickered, he held on to a fragile belief that one day, somehow, the truth would matter more than the lies. That one day, the same God who had carried him from a dusty village to the top of Africa's richest lists would see the tears no one else saw. He didn't know how or when, but he believed his story wasn't finished. And somewhere in the vast, noisy, beautiful chaos of Nigeria, fate was already preparing the answer. A gift so profound it would silence every whisper forever. The first marriage, Adora. Emeka Nwankwo was 32 when he first laid eyes on Adora Okeke. It was at the annual charity gala of the Lagos Children's Foundation, held in the grand ballroom of the Eco Hotel. The room shimmered with crystal chandeliers, and the air was filled with the scent of expensive perfumes and fresh orchids flown in from Thailand. Governors, senators, musicians, and Nollywood stars mingled under soft golden lights, bidding millions on auction items to support orphan children across Nigeria. Emeka had donated the largest sum that night, 50 million naira, quietly, without asking for a plaque or a speech. He stood near the back in a perfectly tailored midnight blue agbada, embroidered with subtle silver threads, sipping sparkling water while others drank champagne. He preferred to watch, to listen, to give without expectation. That's when Adora walked past him. She wore a deep emerald green gown that hugged her figure like it had been sewn onto her that very afternoon. Her skin glowed like polished ebony, and her smile was wide and genuine as she greeted guests. She was laughing at something a foreign ambassador had said, her head thrown back slightly. And in that moment, Emeka felt something shift inside his chest, a quiet, powerful jolt he had never experienced before. He later learned she was a human rights lawyer from a respected Igbo family in Abuja. Her father was a retired permanent secretary, and her mother was a professor of literature at the University of Nigeria. Adora had studied at Oxford on scholarship, returned home, and now worked tirelessly for women and children's rights. She was brilliant, fierce, kind, and completely unaware that the quiet billionaire in the corner had just fallen deeply, irrevocably in love. For weeks afterward, Emeka couldn't get her out of his mind. He saw her face when he closed his eyes at night. He heard her laughter in the silence of his mansion. He, who had always been in perfect control of his emotions, found himself distracted during board meetings, staring out at the Lagos skyline and wondering if she liked the ocean view as much as he did. He asked discreetly about her through mutual friends. When he learned she was single, something hopeful stirred in him, something he had long buried beneath layers of work and guarded solitude. Their first real conversation happened 3 months later at another fundraiser, this time for sickle cell awareness. Emeka arrived early, nervous in a way he hadn't been since his university entrance exams. When he saw her across the room in a simple but elegant red dress, he gathered his courage and walked over. "Good evening," he said, voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. "I believe we met briefly at the Eco Hotel Gala." Emeka Nwankwo. Adora turned, and her eyes lit up with recognition. "Oh yes, the mystery donor who saved the night. Adora Okeke. It's a pleasure to finally speak with you properly." They talked for hours that evening, about justice, about Nigeria's future, about the children they both wanted to help. She teased him gently for being so quiet in public. He made her laugh with stories of his early days hustling in Apapa. When the event ended, he asked for her number. She gave it without hesitation. What followed was a courtship that felt like it came straight out of a Nollywood romance. Emeka took his time wooing her, doing it with such thoughtfulness. He sent flowers, not flashy bouquets, but single stems of her favorite white lilies, each with a handwritten note. He took her to cozy restaurants overlooking the lagoon where they could chat without interruptions. They attended church together at the Catholic Cathedral on Lagos Island, sitting side by side in the pews, her hand occasionally brushing against his. He even flew her to Calabar for a weekend just to enjoy the carnival drills and savor fresh seafood by the marina. In return, she took him to Abuja to meet her parents, who welcomed him with open arms into their lovely home in Maitama. Adora saw in Emeka a man who had built an empire yet remained humble, someone who carried invisible scars but never complained, and who listened to her dreams with the same intensity he devoted to billion-naira deals. She admired his quiet strength, his deep faith, and the way he spoke about his mother with such respect. For the first time in his adult life, Emeka allowed himself to hope. With Adora, he felt truly seen, not just as the billionaire or the rumored ritualist, but as Emeka, the boy from Onitsha who had fought his way up. She made him laugh, challenged him, and prayed with him. And when she looked at him with those warm, trusting eyes, he dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, God had brought her into his life to heal his deepest wounds. 18 months later, they tied the knot in a wedding that beautifully blended tradition and elegance. The traditional ceremony took place in Adaora's village in Anambra, with hundreds of guests under colorful canopies, the air alive with the sounds of Ojin drums and high-life music. Emeka arrived with a convoy that stretched for blocks, bringing bride-price gifts so generous that Adaora's uncles wept openly. The church wedding followed a week later at the Holy Cross Cathedral in Lagos, where Adora looked radiant in a gown of French lace, and Emeka was handsome and emotional in his white traditional attire with gold embroidery. Davido performed, and Genevieve Nagy was a bridesmaid. The reception at the Eco Signature was a dream come true. Thousands of guests, fireworks lighting up the Atlantic, and a cake taller than most kids. On their wedding night, in the presidential suite overlooking the ocean, Emeka held his new wife close and whispered through tears he could no longer hold back. Adora, you've given me more than I ever deserved. I promise to love you, protect you, and make you happy every single day of our lives. She kissed him softly and replied, and I promise to walk this journey with you, Emeka, wherever it leads. You are my home. In those early months of marriage, their joy knew no bounds. They traveled, Dubai for their honeymoon, Paris for Christmas, and New York for New Year's. They built a life in the Ikoyi mansion, mornings spent praying together in the chapel, evenings cooking jollof rice side by side in their massive kitchen while playfully arguing over who made it better. Adora continued her legal work. Emeka focused on his businesses, but they always carved out time for each other. Though they both longed for children, especially Adora, who dreamed of a house filled with little feet running across marble floors, they believed it would happen in God's time. They even prepared the nursery, soft blues and creams, a hand-carved crib from Italy, tiny clothes neatly folded in drawers. Emeka watched Adaora's face light up whenever they passed baby shops, and his heart swelled with love and quiet fear. He hadn't yet shared the full truth with her. He kept telling himself there was still time, that miracles could happen, and maybe the doctors had been wrong all those years ago. He clung to that hope like a lifeline, because losing Adora, the one person who made the world feel whole again, was a pain he could not bear to imagine. Little did he know that the storm was already gathering on the horizon, and that the love they shared, as deep and true as it was, would soon face the cruelest test of all. 5 childless years. The first year of marriage passed like a beautiful dream. Emeka and Adora woke each morning wrapped in each other's arms, sunlight filtering through silk curtains onto their king-sized bed. They prayed together, ate breakfast on the terrace overlooking the garden, fresh fruits, akara, and pap prepared by the chef, and then kissed goodbye as they left for their separate worlds. Adora to her law chambers in Victoria Island, Emeka to his office tower in Ikoyi. Evenings brought them back together, cooking experiments that often ended in laughter over burnt stew, long walks along the beach at Tarkwa Bay, or quiet nights reading side by side in the library. They spoke openly about children from the beginning. Adora wanted 4, 2 boys to protect their sisters, 2 girls to keep the house lively. Emeka smiled and agreed, secretly adding 1 more in his heart. They chose names, Chukwabuka for the first boy, meaning God is great, Adiz for a girl, Princess of the King. They even argued playfully over middle names. The nursery remained ready, soft toys on the shelves, a rocking chair by the window, mobile of stars hanging above the crib. But months turned into a year, and Adaora's cycle came faithfully every 28 days. She told herself it was normal. Many couples took time. Emeka held her closer at night, whispering, "It will happen, Nkam. God's timing is perfect." In the second year, hope still burned bright, but quiet worry began to creep in. Adora tracked her ovulation religiously, apps on her phone, temperature charts, herbal teas recommended by her mother. They made love with intention, not just passion, timing everything perfectly. Friends announced pregnancies left and right. At baby showers, Adora held newborns with a smile that never reached her eyes, cooing over tiny fingers while her heart twisted. Emeka watched her from across the room, aching to take the pain away. One night, after another negative test, Adora sat on the bathroom floor in tears. Emeka found her there, knees drawn to her chest, the white plastic stick discarded in the bin. "I'm sorry," she whispered when he knelt beside her. "Maybe something is wrong with me." He pulled her into his arms, rocking her gently. "Nothing is wrong with you. You are perfect. We will see a doctor if you want. Whatever it takes." They began the medical journey together, first discreetly, then more urgently. Adaora's tests came back perfect, hormones balanced, tubes clear, ovaries healthy. The doctor smiled and said, "You're very fertile, madam." No problem at all. Relief washed over her, but Emeka felt a cold grip of dread creeping in. He put off his own tests, claiming work was too busy, convincing himself there was no rush. Year 3 brought visits to specialists in London and South Africa. They flew first class, stayed in fancy apartments, and turned the trips into mini vacations. At Harley Street clinics, Adora went through more scans and blood work. Everything still looked great. Emeka submitted a sample once, but later claimed the lab lost it when the nurse called for a repeat. He just couldn't face the truth, not when Adora looked at him with such trust. Back home, the pressure quietly mounted. Adaora's mom started calling more often. "My daughter, how far? Your younger sister is already expecting her second. Time is going." Friends stopped asking directly and began praying loudly around her. "This year will not pass you by in Jesus' name." Church women laid hands on her belly during anointing services. Adora handled it all with grace, but came home and cried in the shower where Emeka couldn't hear. He watched her faith waver for the first time. The woman who once danced in church now sat silently during testimony time when mothers thanked God for their blessings. Guilt weighed heavy in his chest. He knew he should tell her. He should have told her before the wedding. But how do you break the heart of the one you love, knowing that the one thing she wants most in the world is the one thing you can never give her? Year 4 was the toughest. Hope had faded into desperation. They tried IVF twice, once in Johannesburg, then in a top clinic in Lagos. Adora endured daily injections that left her bruised and bloated, mood swings making her cry over spilled water, and sleepless nights filled with fear. Emeka paid for the best doctors, flew in experts, and turned the guest wing into a makeshift medical suite. The first cycle failed to produce viable embryos. The second implanted two, but 2 weeks later, Adora woke up bleeding in the night. Emeka rushed her to the hospital, holding her hand as she sobbed uncontrollably in the back of the G-Wagon. The ultrasound showed empty sacs, blighted ovum. The doctor spoke gently, but the words felt like knives. That night, Adora lay curled away from him in bed, her shoulders shaking. Emeka reached for her, but she flinched. "Please," she whispered, "just let me be tonight." He lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, tears sliding silently into his pillow. He prayed harder than ever, begging, bargaining, promising God anything if only he would perform a miracle. Year 5 began with a fragile determination. They decided to take a break from treatments and traveled to the Seychelles for a month, trying to rediscover joy. They walked barefoot on the beaches, swam in turquoise waters, and made love under the stars. For a while, it felt like the early days again. Adora laughed more, and Emeka dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, nature would surprise them. But when they returned, reality was waiting. One rainy evening in their 5th year of marriage, Adora came home early from work. Emeka was in his study, reviewing contracts. She stood in the doorway, her face pale, eyes red. "We need to talk," she said quietly. He knew. His heart sank like a stone in the lagoon. They sat in the living room overlooking the garden, rain drumming on the glass roof. Adora held a folder, medical reports she had requested behind his back. "I went to the clinic today," she began, her voice trembling. "I asked them to review everything again. All the cycles, all the failures." She paused, swallowing hard. "They said, the issue is not with me. It never was." Emeka's throat closed. He couldn't speak. Adora opened the folder with shaking hands. A lab report stared up at him. His name, the date from a sample he thought had been lost years ago. Azoospermia. 0 sperm count. Severe male factor infertility. Irreversible. The silence stretched unbearably. "Why didn't you tell me?" Adora finally whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. 5 years, Emeka. 5 years of hoping, crying, injecting myself with hormones, blaming my body, when you knew. Emeka's voice broke. "I was afraid. I thought, maybe a miracle. I couldn't bear to lose you." "Lose me?" She laughed bitterly through her tears. "You lost me the moment you chose silence over truth. I married you believing we would build a family together. I gave you my youth, my body, my heart. And you let me suffer alone with a secret you carried." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I love you," he said desperately. "More than anything. We can adopt. We can." "No." Her voice was firm now, though it shook. "I want to carry my own child. I want to feel life grow inside me. I want the stretch marks, the morning sickness, and the labor pains. And you knew. You could never give me that." Emeka fell to his knees before her, head bowed, tears streaming. "Adora, please. Forgive me. I was a coward. But I love you. Don't leave." She looked down at him, the man she had loved with every fiber of her being. and her heart shattered all over again. "I need time," she said finally, standing. "I'm going to my parents' house in Abuja tomorrow." That night, they slept in separate rooms for the first time since their wedding. Emeka did not sleep at all. He sat in the nursery, rocking slowly in the chair meant for midnight feeds, staring at the empty crib. The rain had stopped. The silence was worse. He wept until his chest ached, whispering apologies to the children who would never be born, to the woman sleeping down the hall who had trusted him completely. A week later, Adora came back only to pack her things. She left a simple note on the dresser. "I will always love the man I thought you were. But I cannot stay with the man who watched me break and said nothing. Goodbye, Emeka." When the door closed behind her, Emeka sank to the floor of their bedroom no longer, and cried like a child who had lost everything. The mansion, once filled with love and laughter, became a tomb of memories. The nursery door remained locked. The wealth that continued to pour in felt like mockery. And for the first time in his adult life, Chief Emeka Nwankwo, billionaire, philanthropist, conqueror of worlds, was utterly, completely alone. Adaora's departure. The morning Adora left, the sky over Lagos was heavy with rain clouds, as though the heavens themselves mourned what was about to happen. Emeka woke before dawn, hoping the night had been a nightmare. But the bed beside him was cold and empty. He walked through the silent mansion like a ghost, past the kitchen where they once danced to old Osadibi songs while waiting for yam to boil, past the living room where they had planned their future on lazy Sunday afternoons, past the locked nursery door that neither of them had opened in months. He found her in the walk-in closet, carefully folding clothes into 2 large suitcases. Her back was to him, but he could see the tension in her shoulders and the slight tremble in her hands as she placed her favorite red dress, the one she wore the night they met, into the case. "Adora," he said softly, his voice hoarse from a sleepless night. She didn't turn around. "I'm almost done." He stepped closer, feeling desperate. "Please, let's talk. I'll share everything. Every detail, every fear I've carried since I was 12. We can see counselors, pastors, anyone. We can adopt tomorrow if that's what you want. Just don't go." Adora paused, her hand resting on a silk scarf he had bought her in Paris. For a moment, he thought she might soften. But when she turned, her eyes were red and resolute. "It's too late, Emeka," she said quietly. 5 years. 5 years of my body being poked and prodded, of injections and scans and false hopes. 5 years of watching other women grow round with life while I smiled and pretended it didn't kill me inside. And all that time, you knew? You knew the problem was yours, and you let me carry the shame alone." Emeka's knees buckled. He sank onto the ottoman in the center of the closet, burying his head in his hands. "I was terrified," he admitted, his voice breaking. "I thought if you knew the truth, you would leave me before we even started. I kept telling myself I would tell you after the wedding, then after the first year, then after the second. I kept waiting for a miracle that never came. I was selfish. I was a coward. But I swear on my mother's life, I never meant to hurt you." Tears streamed silently down Adaora's cheeks. She knelt in front of him, taking his hands in hers, the first time they had touched in weeks. "I believe you didn't mean to hurt me," she whispered. "That's what makes this worse. Because I loved you so completely. I would have stood by you. If you had trusted me enough to tell me the truth from the start, I would have grieved with you, prayed with you, chosen a different path with you. We could have adopted years ago. We could have built a family in another way. But you didn't trust me with your pain, Emeka. You didn't trust me to love you even when you felt broken." Emeka wept openly now, great sobs shaking his broad shoulders. "I thought I wasn't enough for you without kids. I thought you would look at me and see only what was missing." Adora cupped his face, her thumbs brushing away his tears. "I looked at you and saw everything I ever wanted, until I realized you never believed you were enough for me." They stayed there for what felt like forever, kneeling on the closet floor, surrounded by half-packed clothes, holding each other tight as the love they had built slowly crumbled around them. Finally, Adora stood up. "My flight to Abuja is at noon. My dad is waiting." Emeka helped her close the suitcases with trembling hands, insisting on carrying them downstairs himself. He wouldn't let the driver touch them. In the foyer, under the massive chandelier that had sparkled on their wedding day, they faced each other one last time. "I'll never stop loving you," Emeka said, his voice cracking. "If you ever need anything, anything at all, you know where to find me." Adora nodded, unable to say a word. She reached up and straightened his collar, a little gesture she had done every morning for 5 years. Then she kissed his cheek softly, lingering for a moment as if trying to memorize the feel of him. The door opened. Rain started to pour down in heavy sheets. The driver held an umbrella, but Adora walked right into the downpour, letting it soak her as she climbed into the car. Emeka stood at the threshold, watching the taillights disappear down the palm-lined driveway, until the gates closed, and all that was left was the sound of rain hitting the marble. He didn't move for hours. Later, the staff found him still standing in the open doorway, soaked to the bone, staring into space. They gently led him inside, but he refused food, refused to change, and turned down everything but the pain. That night, he sat in the darkened living room with a bottle of expensive cognac he didn't touch. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through photos. Their wedding, their honeymoon in Dubai, Adora laughing on a camel, her sleeping on his chest during a flight to New York, her dancing at her cousin's wedding with pure joy lighting up her face. He cried until there were no tears left, until his throat felt raw and his chest ached with a grief deeper than anything he had felt since the day of the accident. Days turned into weeks. Adora filed for divorce quietly, through lawyers. Emeka signed everything without contest. She kept only her personal belongings and a small settlement, way less than she deserved. She moved back to Abuja, throwing herself into her work with a fierceness that worried her colleagues. A year later, Emeka got an invitation in the mail. It was a cream-colored card, elegant script. Mr. and Mrs. Chukwudi Okonkwo joyfully announced the dedication of their twins, Chidera and Chidibam. Adora had remarried, a kind doctor from her church, a widower with no kids of his own. The twins were born just 9 months after the wedding. Emeka held the invitation for a long time, tracing the names of the babies with his fingertip. He sent a generous, anonymous gift through a mutual friend. Then he went to the chapel in his mansion, knelt before the crucifix, and wept again. Not out of jealousy, not out of anger, but for the life they might have had if he had been braver. For the woman who had loved him completely, and whom he had failed in the worst way a husband can fail his wife. For the children who would never call him daddy, and for the empty space in his heart that no amount of money, no empire, no success could ever fill. Adaora's departure didn't just take her from the house. It took the last sliver of hope Emeka had been clinging to, that somehow, against all odds, he might still become a father. And in the silence that followed, in the vast, echoing mansion filled with everything except the sound of family, Emeka began to understand the true cost of the secret he had carried for so long. He was rich beyond measure, but he had never felt poorer in his life. After Adora left, Emeka shut himself off from the world for nearly 2 years. He worked longer hours, traveled more, and poured himself into new ventures, renewable energy plants in the north, fintech hubs in Ghana, massive housing projects in Abuja. His wealth kept climbing, but his smiles became rarer and laughter non-existent. Friends worried. His mom called daily from Enugu, begging him to eat, to visit, to let someone in. Pastors prayed over him. He attended church mechanically, nodding at sermons about restoration while feeling nothing. He told himself he was done with marriage. One devastating loss was enough. Kids were a dream for other men. He would focus on philanthropy, build more orphanages, fund more scholarships. That would be his legacy. But God, it seemed, had other plans. Ngozi entered his life like a burst of sunlight breaking through storm clouds. She was 31, a vibrant entrepreneur from Port Harcourt, running a successful fashion label called Rivers Gold that blended traditional Niger Delta styles with modern flair. Her designs were bold, bright corals, deep indigos, intricate beadwork that told stories of rivers and ancestors. Celebrities wore her pieces on red carpets. She had built her brand from a small sewing machine in her mom's sitting room to showrooms in Lagos, Abuja, and even London. They met at the Port Harcourt Polo Club during a charity tournament Emeka had sponsored. Ngozi was there cheering on a friend's team, dressed in one of her own creations, a flowing yellow wrapper and blouse that seemed to capture the essence of sunshine. She laughed easily, danced to the live band without a care in the world, and when the auction began, she bid fiercely on a weekend getaway to Obudu Cattle Ranch, determined to win it for her overworked staff. Emeka, seated quietly in the VIP section, found himself smiling for the first time in months as he watched her outbid everyone with playful determination. When she won, the entire tent erupted in cheers. She turned, caught his eye across the crowd, and raised her glass to him in thanks. He had donated the prize. Later, as the evening wrapped up, she made her way over to his table. "Chief Nwankwo," she said, her voice warm and confident, her Rivers accent adding a nice touch. "Thanks for the beautiful prize. My girls are going to go wild when I tell them." He stood, pleasantly surprised at how easily they clicked. "It's my pleasure. Your designs are absolutely stunning, by the way. I saw Tiwa Savage rocking one of your pieces at the Headies." Ngozi laughed, a genuine sound that made something in his chest relax. "Oh, you noticed? Most guys only see the woman, not the fabric." They chatted until the event wrapped up, covering everything from business to the ups and downs of being self-made, and the beauty of the Niger Delta compared to the hustle of Lagos. When she left, he realized he hadn't thought about Adora even once that night. What followed was a slow and intentional courtship. Ngozi was nothing like Adora. Where Adora had been all about refinement and intellect, Ngozi was fiery and totally unfiltered. She teased him about his serious demeanor, took him to local buka joints in Port Harcourt for bowl and fish, and even got him to dance a zonto at beach parties, despite his claims of having no rhythm. She affectionately called him Chief Serious and wasn't intimidated by his wealth at all. She had her own battles. Her father passed away young, leaving her mother to raise 6 kids alone. Ngozi put herself through university by sewing clothes at night. She understood struggle and the grind of building something from scratch. Unlike many women who approached Emeka, she wanted him, not his money or connections. She challenged him, inspired him, and made him feel alive again. For the first time in years, Emeka let hope seep back in. He promised himself this time would be different. Ngozi knew about his past marriage. She'd read the blogs and heard the whispers, but she brushed it off with a wave. "People talk rubbish when they're jealous. I don't listen to gossip. I focus on the man in front of me." He believed her. They dated for a year before he proposed. On a quiet boat ride along the Bonny River at sunset, just the two of them, no big show. He knelt on the deck, holding a simple ring with a single diamond. "Ngozi, you brought color back into my life when everything was gray. Marry me. Let's create something beautiful together." She cried, laughed, and said yes all at once. The wedding was smaller than his first, but just as joyful. Held partly in Port Harcourt and partly in Lagos, it celebrated both their roots. Ngozi designed her own dress, ivory lace with gold embroidery that caught the light beautifully. Emeka's mother danced so hard her geli nearly fell off, while Ngozi's siblings sang traditional songs that brought everyone to tears. In the early months of marriage, they were blissfully happy. They split time between Lagos and Port Harcourt. Ngozi expanded her brand with Emeka's quiet support, opening a flagship store in Victoria Island. They traveled, Sao Tome for honeymoon, Cape Town for anniversary, Italy for Fashion Week. They argued passionately about everything from politics to jollof rice, then made up even more passionately. And like before, they spoke about children immediately. Ngozi wanted 3, 2 boys and a girl. She declared one night as they lay on the rooftop terrace watching stars. "The boys will be tall like you. The girl will have my fire." Emeka's heart clenched, but he smiled. Whatever God gives us. This time, he was determined to be honest. He scheduled a doctor's appointment 6 months into the marriage, intending to finally face the results together. But work delayed it, then travel, then Ngozi's fashion show season. He told himself there was no rush. They were young, healthy, happy. The first year passed without conception. Ngozi shrugged it off. "My mama took 2 years before me. It will happen." The second year brought subtle tension. Ngozi's cycles became a monthly disappointment. She started tracking, taking folic acid, drinking herbal concoctions from her village. They made love with calendars in mind. Friends asked innocently at parties, "When are we hearing the good news?" Ngozi laughed it off, but Emeka saw the strain in her eyes. He finally went for the test alone, telling her it was a routine checkup. The results were the same as always: 0 sperm count. Irreversible. He came home that evening carrying the report in his briefcase like a death sentence. He planned to tell her over dinner, to lay everything bare: the accident, the secret, the fear. But when he walked in, Ngozi was waiting with a surprise. She had turned the guest room into a nursery, soft greens and yellows, animal murals on the walls, and a beautiful crib hand-carved in Calabar. "I know it's early," she said, her eyes sparkling, "but I wanted us to have faith, to prepare our hearts. When the baby comes, everything will be ready." Emeka stood frozen in the doorway, the report burning a hole in his back. He couldn't tell her. Not then. Not when she looked at him with such pure, unwavering belief. He hugged her tightly, hiding the tears that threatened to spill, and whispered, "It's perfect. Just like you." The third year became a slow unraveling. Ngozi's hope shifted to worry, then to quiet desperation. She saw specialists in Lagos, then London. Her tests, like Adaora's, came back perfect. The doctors suggested Emeka be tested. He kept delaying, using stress, travel, anything as excuses. One night, after yet another failed cycle, Ngozi sat on the edge of the bed, crying silently. Emeka held her, guilt gnawing at him. "I think something is wrong with me," she whispered. "Maybe I'm paying for some sin I don't know about." Emeka's heart shattered. "No, never think that. You're perfect." But he still couldn't bring himself to say the words. The truth slipped out by accident. Desperate for answers, Ngozi contacted the London clinic behind his back. A sympathetic nurse, remembering Emeka from years ago, confirmed they had old records. Ngozi paid for copies to be sent. When the envelope arrived, she opened it alone in the study. The report was clear. The dates went back years. The diagnosis hadn't changed. She confronted him that evening as he returned from work. The fight was devastating. Ngozi hurled the papers at him, tears streaming down her face, her voice breaking between Igbo and English. 3 years, Emeka. 3 years of me blaming my body, crying in bathrooms, praying and fasting, while you knew. You knew and you let me suffer. Emeka fell to his knees, begging. "I was going to tell you. I swear. I couldn't bear to break your heart." "You already did," she screamed. "You watched me build a nursery for children that can never come. And you said nothing. How could you do this to me? How could you do this twice?" The words hung in the air like smoke. Ngozi's face crumpled as realization hit. Adora. She left for the same reason, didn't she? It wasn't her. It was never her. It was you. Emeka could only nod, tears streaming down his face. Ngozi sank to the floor across from him, hugging her knees, rocking back and forth. "I loved you," she whispered. "I loved you enough to build a life with you. If you had just been honest from the start, we could have figured things out. Adopted, used donors, found a way. But you didn't trust me. You didn't believe I was strong enough to love the real you." 2 weeks later, she was gone. The divorce was quiet, painful, and final. Ngozi kept her business, her dignity, and a settlement she barely touched. She moved back to Port Harcourt and threw herself into her work with a fierce passion that made her brand explode internationally. Emeka was left with an empty nursery, another closed door in his mansion, and a piece of his heart lost forever. He sat in the dark for days, staring at the crib Ngozi had chosen, running his fingers over the smooth wood. 2 wives, 2 loves, 2 devastating failures. All because of one secret he could never bring himself to share. As the pain sank deeper, Emeka wondered if he was destined to walk through life alone. Rich beyond measure, powerful beyond imagining, but forever childless, forever broken, forever haunted by a childhood accident that had stolen more than he could ever reclaim. 3 years of hope and heartbreak. The first year with Ngozi felt like a breath of fresh air. Every morning, Emeka woke to the delicious smell of fresh pepper soup simmering in the kitchen, Ngozi's specialty, made with catfish from the Bonny River and spices that reminded him of home. She'd pad into the bedroom wearing one of his oversized shirts, her hair wrapped in a colorful scarf, bringing a tray of breakfast, boiled plantain, scrambled eggs with uga leaves, and steaming tea. They'd eat in bed, laughing over silly things, her teasing him for reading business news before sunrise, him pretending to be offended when she swiped the last piece of plantain. They turned the Ikoyi mansion into a real home again. Ngozi redecorated with vibrant river's delta colors, deep blues and golds, woven raffia baskets on the walls, handmade pottery from her village proudly displayed on shelves. She filled the rooms with music, Burna Boy, flavor, and old-school highlife that made the staff smile as they worked. On weekends, they'd escape to Port Harcourt, staying in her family's compound where her mother would insist on feeding Emeka pounded yam until he begged for mercy, and her younger brothers would drag him to play football on dusty pitches. Children were always part of the conversation, but lightly, joyfully. One evening, as they sat on the balcony watching the sunset paint the lagoon orange, Ngozi rested her head on his shoulder. "I want three," she said dreamily. "Two little troublemakers like their father, and one princess who will rule us all." Emika's heart clenched, but he kissed her forehead. "Three sounds perfect. We'll start practicing right away." That night, they made love with the windows open to the ocean breeze. No calendars, no pressure, just the pure joy of being young and in love. Emika let himself believe that this time, maybe God would answer differently. But month after month, Ngozi's period arrived like clockwork. At first, they laughed it off. "My body is just enjoying the marriage too much," Ngozi joked. "It's not ready to share me yet." Emika smiled along, but the old fear began to creep back in. Year 2 brought subtle changes. Ngozi started buying ovulation kits in secret, peeing on sticks in the bathroom, while Emika pretended not to notice. She drank Agbo mixtures sent by her aunt in the village, bitter herbs wrapped in newspaper, boiled into dark tea that she forced down with a grimace. Every morning, she tracked her temperature, marking little red dots on a chart hidden in her bedside drawer. They still made love often, passionately, but now there was an undercurrent of purpose. Ngozi would whisper afterward, hand on her flat belly, "This time, I feel it. I really do." Emika held her tighter, guilt gnawing at him like a silent rat. He promised himself he would tell her soon. After her next big fashion show. After their anniversary trip to Zanzibar. After. The heartbreak came in waves. The first Real crack appeared at a family naming ceremony in Port Harcourt. Ngozi's younger sister had just given birth to a bouncing baby boy. The compound overflowed with joy, drums, dancing, money spraying everywhere, palm wine flowing like rivers. Ngozi carried the baby all day, rocking him gently, singing lullabies in Kalabari. When the child finally fell asleep against her chest, she looked up at Emika with eyes full of longing. One day, she whispered, "This will be us." Emika nodded, throat tight, unable to speak. That night, back in their hotel room, Ngozi cried quietly in the shower. Emika stood outside the door, fist pressed to his mouth, hating himself for the secret burning inside him. Year 3 was when hope began to crack. Ngozi's laughter grew quieter. Her smiles took effort. She threw herself into work with a desperation that worried her staff. New collections launched every few months. International buyers courted relentlessly, sleepless nights sketching designs until dawn. The medical visits began in earnest. First, they saw specialists in Lagos, then a fertility clinic in London during Fashion Week. Blood tests, ultrasounds, hormone panels. Every result for Ngozi came back glowing. Highly fertile. No issues detected. The doctors turned gentle eyes to Emika. "Sir, we'll need a sample from you as well." He made excuses, upcoming board meetings, travel schedules, stress affecting results. The doctors nodded politely, but Ngozi's face grew harder each time. Pressure came from outside too. Ngozi's mother called weakly. "My daughter, you people are enjoying too much. Children are a blessing from God. Start praying seriously." Church members laid hands on her belly during deliverance services. Old classmates sent WhatsApp messages with photos of their toddlers. "When are we coming for yours?" Ngozi endured it all with diminishing grace. One night, after a tough church testimony where a woman joyfully thanked God for twins after a decade of waiting, Ngozi came home and locked herself in the nursery. The beautiful room she had decorated with so much excitement. Emika found her sitting on the floor, surrounded by unopened boxes of baby clothes she had impulsively bought during a trip to Dubai. She was clutching a tiny pair of blue booties, rocking back and forth, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. "I don't get it," she whispered when he knelt beside her. "We pray. We give to the church. We try to live right. Why is God punishing me?" Emika's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. "It's not you," he said desperately. "It's not your fault." But even then, he couldn't bring himself to say the words. The breaking point came 6 months later. Ngozi had been feeling unusually tired, her breasts tender and a bit nauseous. They allowed themselves to hope. She took 3 pregnancy tests, all positive. They cried together, laughing through tears, calling her mom at 2 a.m. just to hear her scream with joy. They booked the best obstetrician in Lagos. Emika canceled an overseas trip. They whispered names again. Chukwamika for a boy, Chimamanda for a girl. At 8 weeks, The scan showed a sac, but no heartbeat. Chemical pregnancy. Early miscarriage. Ngozi collapsed in the doctor's office, a sound coming from her throat that Emeka had never heard from anyone. A deep, animal-like grief that tore through him like shrapnel. He carried her to the car, holding her as she sobbed against his chest all the way home. For days, she barely ate or spoke. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, hand resting on her empty belly. One evening, she finally turned to him. I need answers, Emeka. Real answers. I'm going to London next week. The doctor there said we should both do full panels. No more excuses. He nodded, promising he would go, but fear paralyzed him. In a moment of desperation, he went alone to a different clinic under a false name. The results came back the same day: azoospermia. 0 sperm. No change. No hope. He sat in his car in the hospital parking lot, report trembling in his hands, and wept like a child. When he got home, Ngozi was waiting. She had found the appointment card in his jacket pocket, the one for the secret test. Her face was calm. Too calm. You went without me, she said quietly. Ngozi, show me the results. He handed them over with shaking hands. She read them slowly, page by page. When she reached the final diagnosis, her breath hitched. 3 years. 3 years of hope, of tears, of herbs and prayers and scans and sex on schedule. 3 years of her body being blamed, her faith tested, her heart broken over and over. All while he knew. Ngozi dropped the papers as though they burned her. She looked at him, not with anger, but with a profound, devastating sadness. You let me hope, she whispered. You let me build an entire future on a lie. You watched me lose a baby that was never real, and you said nothing. Emeka fell to his knees before her. I was going to tell you. I swear. I just couldn't find the courage. Courage. Her voice rose for the first time. You have courage to build companies worth billions. You have courage to face boards of directors and presidents. But you didn't have the courage to tell your wife, the woman who shares your bed, your life, your prayers, that you can never give her children. She stood, walking to the window overlooking the darkening lagoon. I would have stayed, she said, voice breaking. If you had told me before we married, or even in the first year, I would have grieved with you. We could have adopted. We could have used donors. We could have chosen a different kind of family. But you took that choice from me. You let me fall in love with a future that could never exist. Emeka crawled to her, wrapping his arms around her legs, sobbing into her wrapper. Please, don't leave. I can't lose you too. But Ngozi gently pried his hands away. I'm not Adora, she said softly. I'm not walking away because you can't have children. I'm walking away because you didn't trust me to love you anyway. She left the next morning. Emeka stood at the gate, watching her car disappear, just like he had watched Adaora's years before. 2 wives, 2 profound loves, 2 catastrophic failures. All because of one childhood accident and the lifelong cowardice it had bred in him. He walked back into the empty mansion, past the nursery with its untouched crib and tiny booties still on the floor. For the first time in his life, Chief Emeka Nwankwo, the man who had conquered poverty, built an empire, survived every obstacle life threw at him, felt utterly defeated. Hope, he realized that night as he sat alone in the dark, had been the cruelest luxury of all. And now even that was gone. The third wife, Ifeoma. After Ngozi's departure, Emeka Nwankwo swore off love forever. The mansion in Ikoyi became a fortress of solitude once more, staff moving like shadows, rooms echoing with absence. He threw himself into work with a ferocity that alarmed his board, acquiring competitors, launching apps that disrupted banking, funding solar farms across the Sahel. His net worth soared past new milestones, but sleep evaded him. Nights were spent pacing the balcony, staring at the dark lagoon, replaying every failure, Adaora's quiet tears, Ngozi's fiery accusations. 2 women he had loved deeply, 2 marriages shattered on the rocks of his unspoken truth. 3rd time's the charm, his mother said during one of her rare visits, holding his face in her weathered hands. But only if you tell her everything first, NWAM. No more secrets. Emeka nodded, but his heart felt like a barren wasteland. Love seemed like a trap, and marriage felt like a sentence to even more pain. He went to events alone, put on a smile for the cameras, and donated billions to fertility clinics and orphanages as a quiet way to make up for things. Women approached him, models, actresses, daughters of governors. but he kept them at arm's length, polite chats ending with goodbyes. Then came Ifeoma. She was 27, a runway model from Benin City, moving with the grace of a gazelle and having eyes that captured the depth of the Edo forests. Ifeoma had conquered Lagos Fashion Week, Milan, New York, her lithe frame draped in designs that turned heads all over the world. But beneath all that glamour, she was down to earth. The daughter of a retired police commissioner and a schoolteacher, she volunteered at girls' homes in Edo State, teaching self-defense and building confidence in street kids. They met at a high-society wedding in Abuja, the union of a tech mogul and a senator's daughter. The venue was a palace of excess. White peacocks roamed the gardens, helicopters ferried guests, and there was a performance by Wizkid under crystal-draped tents. Emeka sat alone at a corner table, nursing palm wine, when Ifeoma glided by in a shimmering gold gown that caught the light like liquid sunshine. She stopped, smiled, a genuine, warm smile that lit up her eyes. "You're Chief Emeka, right? I've heard so much about your scholarships for girls like me from Benin." He stood, surprised. "And you are?" "Ifeoma Egiga. Model. Activist. Huge fan of your work." They talked through the night. She was different, playful yet deep, laughing at his dry humor and challenging his cynicism about marriage. "Love isn't a contract, Chief," she said, her eyes sparkling. "It's a leap. Scary but worth it." For the first time in years, Emeka felt truly seen, not just as the billionaire or the barren man, but as himself. Ifeoma didn't pry into his past marriages. Instead, she shared her own struggles, the pressure of beauty standards, the unwanted attention from industry men, the loneliness of hotel rooms abroad. "I want a real home," she confessed over dessert. "Someone to build a life with, not just someone to pose for." Emeka's walls began to crack. He courted her with a vulnerability he hadn't shown in ages. They had private dinners at hidden spots in Lekki, fresh lobster from the Atlantic, candlelight reflecting off the waves. They took jet rides to Seychelles beaches, walking hand in hand at dawn. His gifts were thoughtful, a custom jewelry box carved with Edo motifs, books on African feminism she had once mentioned. He took her to Onitsha to meet his parents. Mama Nneka pulled her aside, whispering blessings in Igbo. Ifeoma saw the man behind the empire, the boy who survived poverty, the philanthropist who cried over orphans. She softened his edges, made him dance to Afrobeats in the living room, and laugh until his sides hurt. In her presence, the ache dulled. 6 months in, on a quiet evening in the mansion garden under a canopy of stars, Emeka knew it was time to tell her everything. They sat on a bench by the koi pond, fireflies dancing like tiny lanterns. His heart hammered. "Ifeoma," he began, his voice shaky. "Before this goes any further, there's something you need to know." She turned to him, her hand on his. "Tell me." He opened up. The bicycle crash at 12, the surgery, the 0 sperm count, the 2 failed marriages, the rumors, the nightly tears. Words spilled out like a dam breaking. "I'm rich and powerful, but broken in the one way that matters most. I can never give you children. If that's a deal breaker, walk away now. I won't blame you." Silence hung in the air. Ifeoma's eyes filled with tears, not rejection, but compassion. She cupped his face. "Emeka," she whispered, "you think that makes you less? It makes you human. I've seen men with everything who give nothing. You've given the world so much already. Children aren't the only legacy. If God wills it, we'll find a way, adoption, surrogacy, whatever. But I love you. All of you. Scars and all." He wept in her arms that night, relief flooding him like rain after drought. For the first time, honesty didn't end in loss. They prayed together, her head on his chest, promising to face whatever came. Emeka believed this was it. Third time, truly the charm. He proposed 3 months later on the deck of his yacht off Tarkwa Bay, diamonds glittering in the sunset. Ifeoma said yes with joyful tears, leaping into his arms. The wedding was intimate yet magical, held at a private estate in Benin City, blending Edo traditions with modern elegance. Ifeoma's gown was a masterpiece of coral beads and white lace, her natural hair crowned with feathers. Emeka's agbada shimmered in silver and gold. Guests included family, close friends, no media frenzy. They danced under moonlight to a live orchestra playing Ojalegba, her laughter ringing like bells. Honeymoon in Santorini, cliffside villas, azure seas, endless sunsets. They talked futures, Not just dreams, but plans. Adoption first, Ifeoma suggested. From an orphanage in Edo. Our baby's waiting already. The first weeks of marriage were paradise. They nested in the mansion, redecorating together. Ifeoma filled it with Benin bronzes and fresh flowers. Mornings, her modeling shoots, his meetings. Evenings, cooking Edo soups, watching sunsets, making love with a tenderness deepened by truth. Emeka felt whole, loved despite his flaw. Hope flickered, not for biological children, but for the family they would choose. He canceled a major deal to accompany her to an adoption seminar. They visited orphanages hand in hand, holding tiny hands, envisioning their home filled with rescued children. See, Ifeoma whispered one day, kissing him. We're already fathers and mothers in our hearts. Emeka clung to that joy, believing the curse broken. But deep down, a quiet fear lingered, like the rumble before a storm. He pushed it away, focusing on the woman who had chosen him, scars and all. Little did he know, that storm was closer than he imagined, and Ifeoma's grace would soon face a test neither could foresee. The early bliss masked cracks that would soon widen into chasms, proving that even the most honest love could falter under the weight of unfulfilled dreams. The quickest end. The first 2 months of marriage to Ifeoma were the sweetest Emeka had ever known. There was no shadow of unspoken truth between them. No more glancing at the calendar, no more dread when a new month rolled around. Emeka woke up each morning feeling lighter than he had in years. Ifeoma would stretch beside him like a sunbathing cat, her long limbs tangling with his, and whisper, "Good morning, husband," in that sweet Edo lilt that made his heart skip a beat. Weekends were all about planning their future together, full of joy and excitement. They visited motherless babies' homes in Lagos and Benin City, holding tiny infants whose eyes followed them with pure trust. Ifeoma gently cradled a premature girl, singing a lullaby in Bini that brought tears to the matron's eyes. Emeka watched his wife, and felt something inside him start to heal, something he thought was broken forever. "We'll take two at first," Ifeoma said on the drive home, her hand resting on his thigh. "A boy and a girl. Or 2 boys. Or 2 girls. Whatever little hearts God has waiting for us." Emeka kissed her hand. "As many as you want, Kem. This house will never be quiet again." They cleared out the old nursery, the one still haunted by Adaora's soft blues and Ngozi's bright yellows, and repainted it together. Ifeoma picked warm terracotta and cream, colors that reminded her of the Benin earth. They put together new cribs side by side, laughing when the instructions left them puzzled. Emeka hung a wooden mobile of African animals carved by an artisan in Osogbo. Ifeoma strung fairy lights around the windows, saying, "So our babies will always see stars, even in Lagos." For the first time in his life, Emeka dared to dream of fatherhood without fear. He pictured teaching his son to ride a bike, carefully, safely, on grass. He imagined braiding his daughter's hair just like his mother taught him, with all the love and patience in the world. He saw school runs in the mornings, bedtime stories at night, and Christmas mornings filled with wrapping paper everywhere. Ifeoma made everything feel possible. She turned dreams into reality. She was everything he ever wanted in a partner. Beautiful, fierce, compassionate, and, most importantly, she saw his deepest wounds and wasn't afraid of them. When they made love, it was slow and reverent, her fingers tracing the faint surgical scar on his abdomen like it was a sacred mark, not a source of shame. "You're whole to me," she whispered one night, her lips brushing against his skin. "Just as you are." Emeka believed her. He believed her so completely that he let his guard down in ways he never thought he could. He cried in her arms when nightmares brought back memories of the accident. He talked about Adora and Ngozi, not with guilt, but with gratitude for the lessons they taught him about honesty. Ifeoma listened without judgment, holding him until the shaking stopped. They even started the adoption process. Lawyers were consulted, home study scheduled. Ifeoma's joy was contagious. She bought tiny traditional outfits from Benin markets, little agbatas for boys, coral beaded wrappers for girls. She hung them in the nursery closet like promises waiting to be fulfilled. "This time next year," she said one golden afternoon, standing in the nursery doorway with sunlight streaming through the window, catching the dust motes like tiny stars. "This room will be filled with crying, laughing, and little feet running everywhere." Emeka wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her head. And I'll be the happiest man alive. But then, everything shattered during a routine pre-adoption medical checkup. Ifeoma, ever thorough, insisted they both get full physicals. Clean bill of health for the agency, she said lightly. We want them to see we're strong and ready. Emeka agreed without hesitation. He had nothing to hide anymore. They went to a fancy private clinic in Victoria Island, the same one many celebrities used. Ifeoma's exam was quick and glowing. Perfect health, no concerns. Emeka's took longer. Blood work, ultrasound, the familiar semen analysis he had dreaded for years, but now faced with calm acceptance. The doctor, a kind older woman from Ghana with gentle eyes, called them both into her office 2 days later. Ifeoma held Emeka's hand as they sat side by side. The doctor opened the file, then hesitated. Mrs. Nwankwo, she began carefully. All your results are excellent. No issues at all. Ifeoma smiled, squeezing Emeka's hand. Then the doctor turned to him. Chief, your results confirm what you already disclosed. Complete azoospermia. No sperm production. As expected. Emeka nodded. Yes, we know. We're pursuing adoption. The doctor nodded slowly. Of course. That's wonderful. But, she paused, glancing between them. There's something else. Ifeoma's grip tightened. Something else. The doctor's eyes filled with sympathy. Chief Nwankwo, there are signs of testicular tissue abnormalities consistent with long-term complications from childhood trauma. But more concerning, there's a mass. We need immediate specialist referral. It could be benign, but we must rule out malignancy. The word hung in the air like smoke. Cancer. Emeka stared at the report, the letters blurring. The old injury, the one that had taken his fertility, was now threatening his life. Ifeoma's hand went slack in his. The ride home was silent. Lagos traffic roared around them, but inside the car, it felt like a tomb. When they reached the mansion, Ifeoma walked straight to the nursery and closed the door. Emeka stood in the hallway, heart pounding, waiting. Hours passed. When she finally emerged, her eyes were red, her face pale. We need to talk, she said. They sat in the living room overlooking the darkening garden. Ifeoma's voice was flat, stripped of its usual warmth. I knew you couldn't have children biologically. I accepted that. I chose that. I was ready to build a family another way. Emeka nodded, throat burning. But this, she gestured vaguely toward the clinic report on the coffee table. Possible cancer. Treatments. Chemotherapy. Maybe surgery. Maybe you won't survive it. I will survive it, Emeka said fiercely. I've survived everything else. But Ifeoma shook her head. You don't know that. And even if you do, I'm 27, Emeka. I've spent my whole life dreaming of being a mother. Carrying a child. Nursing. All of it. I was willing to give that up for you. But now I might lose you too, and still end up childless. The words hit him like blows. Ifeoma, please. I love you, she whispered, tears finally falling. God help me, I do. But I can't do this. I can't sign up for a life where I might bury my husband and still have empty arms. I can't watch you fight this and lose everything I've ever wanted. Emeka reached for her, but she stood. I thought I was strong enough, she said, voice breaking. I thought love was enough. But I'm not Adora. I'm not Ngozi. I can't carry this kind of pain. Not at the beginning of my life. She walked upstairs, packed a single bag, and called a driver. Emeka followed her to the door, begging, sobbing, on his knees in the foyer, the proud billionaire reduced to pleading. Ifeoma, don't leave me to face this alone. Please. You're my strength. You're my miracle. She paused at the threshold, rain beginning to fall outside just as it had the day Adora left. For a moment, he thought she might turn back, but she only looked at him with infinite sadness. I'm sorry, Emeka, she whispered. I'm so sorry, but I have to choose myself this time. The door closed softly behind her. Emeka remained on the marble floor long after the car drove away. 3 deep loves. 3 endings, each more heartbreaking than the last. Now, Emeka sat alone in the vast mansion, surrounded by silence, with an empty nursery and fairy lights still twinkling in the dark, almost mocking him. He faced not just the quiet he had grown accustomed to, but the terrifying thought that he might never hear a child's laughter echoing through these walls again. Curled up on the cold floor, he wrapped his arms around himself and cried. his body shaking with sobs that came from a place so deep within him. The boy who lost everything on a dusty hill in Onitsha had survived poverty, built an empire, and endured heartbreak twice before. But this felt like the final straw. After Ifeoma left, Emeka found himself wondering if some wounds were just too deep to heal. If some men were meant for solitude rather than family. If all the money in the world could buy everything, except the one thing his heart had always longed for. As he approached 40 in solitude, the years after Ifeoma's departure faded into a gray blur of survival. Emeka Nwankwo turned 39, then 39 and a half, inching closer to 40. Each milestone felt more like a countdown than a celebration. The medical scare that had sent Ifeoma packing turned out to be just a cyst, easily removed. No cancer, no further threat. The doctors called it good fortune. Emeka saw it as cruel irony. His body was spared from death, yet it still denied him the one thing that would make life truly worth living. He retreated deeper into himself. The Ikoyi mansion, once filled with warmth and hope, had become a museum of loss. The nursery door stayed locked, the key hidden in a drawer he never dared to open. The fairy lights Ifeoma had strung up remained unplugged, gathering dust. Staff whispered that the house felt haunted, not by spirits, but by the ghosts of 3 women who had loved him and left. Emeka's days were consumed by work. Board meetings in glass towers, ribbon cuttings for new hospitals he funded, video calls with investors in London and Dubai. His companies thrived. Nwankwo Group became Africa's first trillion-naira conglomerate. Headlines hailed him as the unstoppable Emeka, Nigeria's quiet titan. He smiled for the cameras, shook hands with presidents, and donated hundreds of millions to motherless homes and fertility research. But at night, when the city lights flickered on across the lagoon, the mask fell away. He would sit alone in the darkened living room, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand, staring into nothingness. The silence pressed in like water, heavy and suffocating. Some nights, he wandered the halls, pausing outside the locked nursery, pressing his palm to the door as if he could feel the children who would never sleep behind it. The rumors that had plagued him for years reached a fever pitch. Ifeoma's abrupt departure, barely 2 months after their wedding, fueled fresh gossip. Blogs exploded. Billionaire's third marriage crumbles in record time. Curse or juju. Why Emeka Nwankwo can't keep a wife. Anonymous sources, likely distant cousins or disgruntled staff, leaked details. The infertility, the medical scare, the empty nursery. Social media dissected his life mercilessly. He sacrificed his manhood for money, they wrote. All those billions, and his seed is dead. Blood money always comes with a price. Pastors used him as sermon fodder again. Beware the love of money. Some men have houses full of gold, but wombs full of sorrow. Emeka read it all. He had stopped avoiding the blogs years ago. Now he scrolled through them in the dead of night. Each cruel word a fresh wound on already raw skin. The worst were the photos. Old wedding pictures of him with Adora, with Ngozi, with Ifeoma, all smiling as if happiness were everlasting. Commenters laughed. See how all of them ran? Even models can't stay. Some nights, the pain felt physical. He would curl up on the cold marble floor of his bedroom, arms wrapped around his stomach as if trying to hold together the pieces of himself that kept breaking. Silent tears turned into sobs that tore from his chest, loud and ugly in the empty house. The staff learned to retreat to their quarters when they heard those sounds. No one dared approach the boss in those moments. He prayed, but even prayer felt hollow. In the private chapel, he knelt before the crucifix for hours, forehead pressed to the prayer rug his mother had made. Why, God? He whispered into the silence. I survived the accident. I survived poverty. I built everything from nothing. I give to the poor, to the church, to orphans. I never hurt anyone. Why this punishment? Why take the one thing that would make all the rest matter? He bargained, begged, raged. Take the money. Take the houses, the cars, the companies. Just let me have one child. One. To carry my name, to call me daddy, to bury me when I'm old. Just one. But the chapel stayed silent. His mother came from Enugu when she heard his voice crack over the phone. Mama Neka, now frail but fierce, sat beside him on the balcony, holding his large hand in her small ones. "NWAM," she said softly. "You are killing yourself with this sorrow. God sees your heart. He knows you didn't choose this. Emika's voice broke. Then why does he let them say I did? Why does he let the whole world believe I sold my soul when all I did was survive a boy's accident? Mama wept with him that night, stroking his head as she had when he was 12 and freshly scarred. My son, she whispered, some burdens are too heavy for one man to carry alone. But God never leaves his children. Your story is not finished. He wanted to believe her. But as his 40th birthday approached, belief felt impossible. The invitations went out automatically. His assistants planned a grand celebration. Eco Hotel Ballroom. Live performances by Burna Boy and Tiwa Savage. Governors and presidents invited. A milestone for Africa's greatest entrepreneur. Emeka canceled it all. No party, he told his stunned team. No speeches. No photos. Instead, he spent the weeks leading up to the day in deeper isolation. He visited his parents in Enugu, sitting under the old mango tree where he used to dream as a boy. He drove alone to Onitsha, walking the dusty path of Yamud Hill where the accident happened. The rocks were still there, weathered but unchanged. He knelt among them, running his fingers over the sharp edges that had altered his destiny, and wept for the 12-year-old who had no idea what the fall would cost. Back in Lagos, the viral stories hit their peak. A major blog dropped a lengthy piece titled The Tragedy of Emeka Nwankwo, Billionaire, Philanthropist, Childless. It spilled every detail about his marriages, every breakup, every juicy rumor. Within hours, it was everywhere, shared, debated, and memed. Emeka found himself reading it in bed at 3 a.m., the harsh blue light from his phone illuminating his tear-streaked face. For the first time, he decided to respond publicly, an anonymous comment from a burner account that no one could trace back to him. He didn't sacrifice anything. He was 12. It was an accident. He's just a man trying to live with a pain no money can fix. After hitting post, he stared at the words, then deleted the account. The night before his 40th birthday, Emeka hit rock bottom. He sent the staff home early, locked every door, and turned off his phones. He wandered through the mansion, room by room, touching surfaces that held memories. The dining table where Adora once mapped out their future, the balcony where Ngozi danced in the rain, the garden bench where Ifeoma said yes to his proposal. In the master bedroom, he opened the safe and pulled out 3 small boxes. Inside were the engagement rings he had given each wife, returned quietly after each divorce. The diamonds sparkled in the dim light. Adiora's classic solitaire, Ngozi's fiery ruby, Ifeoma's unique emerald cut. He lined them up on the dresser and sat on the bed, staring. 3 loves, 3 promises, 3 failures. The weight of 40 childless years crashed over him. He fell to his knees beside the bed, face buried in the duvet that still smelled faintly of Ifeoma's perfume, and cried with a depth that scared even him. Great, heaving sobs that felt like they would never end. He cried for the boy who lost his future on a hill, for the man who built an empire but couldn't build a family, for the wives he had loved and lost, for the children who would never exist. God, he gasped between sobs, if you're there, if you haven't abandoned me completely, please. I'm begging. One miracle. Just one. He cried until his throat was raw, until his body shook with exhaustion, until he curled up on the floor and fell into a dreamless sleep. When he woke hours later, dawn was breaking over Lagos. It was his 40th birthday. He stood slowly, aching in every joint, and walked to the balcony. The city stretched before him. Millions of lives starting their day. Millions of children waking in homes big and small. Millions of fathers kissing sleepy heads. Emeka gripped the railing, eyes burning with fresh tears. Another year. Still empty-handed. Still alone. But somewhere deep beneath the devastation, beneath decades of grief, a tiny ember of something, maybe faith or just stubborn survival, flickered. He whispered into the morning light the same prayer he had whispered since childhood. God, you brought me this far. Don't leave me now. He didn't know that, even as he spoke, a young woman in Ajigunal was preparing a woven basket that would change everything. He had no idea that destiny, silent for 40 long years, was finally answering. All he knew, on that quiet birthday morning, was the ache of a heart that refused to stop hoping, even when hope felt like the cruelest burden of all. In the crowded, sweltering heart of Ajigunal, where zinc roofs baked under the Lagos sun and open gutters carried the city's waste toward the lagoon, Chioma Okeke, was fighting a quiet war for survival. Now 28, the years had etched lines of worry around her eyes, making her look older. Her one-room apartment on Boundary Road was a small concrete box with peeling blue paint, a single window covered by a faded Ankara curtain, and a ceiling fan that wheezed more than it cooled. The walls were bare except for one framed photo. Chioma in her graduation gown, beaming beside a kind older man in traditional attire. Chief Emeka Nwankwo, the billionaire who had changed her life. 10 years earlier, as a final-year student at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, Chioma had attended a public lecture on entrepreneurship sponsored by the Nwankwo Foundation. She was brilliant but broke. Her father had passed, her mother was a petty trader in ABA, and her siblings depended on her future salary. During the Q&A, she stood nervously and asked a question about starting small businesses for women without capital. Emeka noticed her right away. The intelligence in her eyes, the determination in her voice despite her worn clothes. Afterward, he approached her. "Young lady," he said gently, "what's your name?" "Chioma Okeke, sir." He handed her his card. "Send me your details. The foundation will cover your final year fees and help you start whatever business you dream of." She thought it was a joke until the money arrived. Full tuition, books, even a small laptop. After graduation, he funded her tailoring shop in ABA. Sewing machines, fabric stock, rent for a year. "Pay it forward one day," he told her with a smile. "That's all I ask." Chioma never forgot. She built her business slowly, sewing school uniforms and church outfits for market women. Life was tough, but hopeful. Then came ease. He was charming, a mid-level banker from Imo State with smooth words and promises of marriage. They dated for a year. When Chioma discovered she was pregnant, joy flooded her. Triplets, the scan revealed. 3 boys. She imagined Emeka's pride if he knew someone he helped was building a family. But ease vanished the moment she told him. "No be me," he texted coldly. "I know ready for Pekin. Talk less of 3. Blocked. Gone. Chioma was left alone, pregnant in a city that devoured the vulnerable. The pregnancy was brutal. High risk from the start. Anemia, hypertension, swollen feet that barely fit her slippers. The public clinic in Ajagunal was overcrowded. Long queues under the sun, nurses shouting, medicines out of stock. Chioma sold half her sewing machines to pay for private scans. Her mother sent Gary and palm oil from ABA, but money ran out fast. Neighbors helped with small chores, but the pity in their eyes stung worse than hunger. Nights were sleepless on her thin mattress, hand on her massive belly, feeling the boys kick and tumble. "Una go suffer with me," she whispered to them in the dark, tears soaking her pillow. "No papa, no money, no space. How I go manage 3 of Una?" The tailoring shop closed. Clients stopped coming. Chioma too heavy to stand long at the machine, fabric too expensive to buy on credit. Savings dwindled to nothing. She hawked pure water some days, belly leading the way, until contractions warned her to stop. One rainy evening, completely worn out, she sank into her plastic chair, scrolling through her cracked phone for job ads that pregnant women could do. That's when she stumbled upon it. A viral blog post titled, "The Lonely Billionaire," inside Emeka Nwankwo's childless life at 40. It had everything: photos of his mansion, his ex-wives, the rumors swirling around him, details about a childhood accident, the 3 failed marriages, and the empty nursery. The nights he spent crying alone. Chioma read every word, tears streaming down her face and landing on the screen. She thought back to his kindness. No strings attached, no expectations. The way he looked at her like she truly mattered. How he talked about wanting kids someday, with a quiet sadness even back then. Her boys were kicking inside her, strong movements from all 3. In that moment, something shifted inside Chioma's heart. She placed both hands on her belly and whispered, "God, you've shown me the way." The decision weighed heavily on her. For weeks, she wrestled with it. How could a mother give away her children? The shame of it. What would people think? What would her mother say? But reality pressed down harder. No money for delivery, no formula for 3 hungry mouths, no space, no strength. The boys deserved better than a life of struggle because their father had run away and their mother couldn't provide. She prayed in the small Catholic church nearby, kneeling heavily before the Virgin Mary statue. "If this is wrong, stop me. But if Chief deserves this blessing, if my sons are meant to be the answer to his prayers, let it be. No thunder, no signs, just a peaceful feeling settling slowly in her soul. She gave birth in a government hospital during a power outage, an emergency C-section under the flickering light of a generator, 3 tiny cries piercing the humid air. Chitty, Chike, Chima. Perfect. Identical. Healthy miracles. The nurses couldn't believe it. Triplets. All boys. God has blessed you, oh. Chioma held them close, memorizing every feature. Tiny fingers, soft cheeks, the way they rooted for milk. She nursed them for 6 weeks in her tiny room, singing Igbo lullabies her mother taught her, rocking all 3 in a single wrapper tied around her body. But formula was expensive. Diapers were impossible to afford. She sold her last sewing machine to buy milk. Neighbors brought small cash gifts, but it just wasn't enough. Emika's 40th birthday was coming up. Chioma noticed the date on a calendar in the market. With her last bit of money, she bought soft Ankara fabric and hand-sewed a large basket liner under a kerosene lamp. She wrote a simple note on a piece of paper torn from an old notebook. A gift from heaven for a kind soul. God bless you always. On the night before his birthday, she bathed the boys one last time, dressing them in the only new outfits she could afford, tiny white singlets bought secondhand. She kissed each forehead, whispering promises. Mama loves you. I will always love you. But this man, he will give you the life I can't provide. Be good boys. Make me proud. Tears fell as she wrapped them in soft blankets and placed them gently in the basket. Under the cover of darkness, she balanced the heavy basket on her head, taking Okada after Okada to Ikoyi, bribing the last driver with her final cash to wait until she reached the gate. The security guards knew the stories of Emika's kindness. One of them looked the other way when she pleaded. She placed the basket at the grand doorstep, arranging the blankets so their faces showed, the note tucked in plain sight. Then she knelt, touching each boy's cheek one last time. Forgive me, she whispered to God, to them, to herself. She turned and walked into the night, sobbing silently, empty-armed but determined. Back in Ajagunal, she collapsed onto her mat and cried until dawn, great, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. She had given away her heart in 3 pieces. But she had also repaid a debt to the man who once gave her a future when she had none. And deep down, beneath the devastating grief of a mother separated from her children, Chioma held on to a fragile hope. That one day, her boys would understand. That one day, Chief Emika would know the sacrifice made for his joy. That one day, love, selfless, painful, unimaginable love, would make everything right. She fell asleep as the sun rose, exhausted but certain she had done the hardest, bravest thing a mother could do. Little did she know that across the city, in a marble mansion filled with sorrow, her gift was about to transform a broken man's life forever. The gift at the doorstep. Chioma's final night with her sons felt like the longest of her life. The tiny room in Ajagunal felt both unbearably small and infinitely vast. The boys slept fitfully in the woven basket lined with the softest Ankara fabric she owned, bright blue and yellow patterns that reminded her of happier days. Chitty, the firstborn, lay in the middle, his tiny fist curled near his mouth. Chike, always the restless one, kicked occasionally in his sleep. Chima, the quietest, breathed soft, even breaths that broke his mother's heart with their innocence. Chioma sat on the edge of her thin mattress, watching them by the dim yellow light of a rechargeable lantern. The fan had stopped hours ago. Nipa had taken light again, and the air hung heavy with the scent of baby powder and the distant smell of the open gutter outside. She reached into the basket and gently touched each face, memorizing every detail. Chitty's long lashes, Chike's slightly fuller cheeks, Chima's perfect little nose that looked just like hers. "My beautiful boys," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Mama's heart is breaking, but this is love. Real love. The kind that hurts more than anything." Tears fell freely now, dripping onto the blanket. She didn't bother to wipe them away. She thought of their father, Ease, with his empty promises and quick disappearances. She thought of her own childhood in ABA, helping her mother sell tomatoes from dawn to dusk, dreaming of a better life. She thought of Chief Emika, the man who had seen potential in a poor student's question and changed her destiny without ever asking for thanks. "He will love you the way I wish I could," she told the sleeping babies. "He will give you schools, doctors, full bellies, safe beds. He will tell you stories of great men and teach you to be kind." He has so much love stored up, waiting for sons like you. A sob escaped her, loud in the stillness of the room. She pressed her fist to her mouth, trying to muffle it, terrified of waking them. The note lay folded on the table, written and rewritten so many times until the words finally felt right. A gift from heaven for a kind soul. Please love them as your own. God will reward you. No name, no explanation, just a truth wrapped in mystery. She had picked Emika's birthday on purpose. She remembered reading somewhere, in an old magazine, that his birthday was in early January. She counted the weeks carefully, waiting until the boys were strong enough for the journey, but before her supplies ran completely dry. At 2 a.m., she made her final preparations. She bathed each boy gently with warm water from the kettle, singing the lullaby her mother used to sing to her. Ani Naim Mma, Chioma Nwa Enki Ichukwu. Their skin smelled of cheap Johnson's baby soap, the last of the bottle. She dressed them in the cleanest, newest clothes she could find. 3 identical white singlets and soft wrappers tied carefully. Into the basket went extra cloth diapers, the last tin of formula, and a small sachet of Cerelac. Then came the hardest part. She lifted each sleeping boy. Miraculously, they stayed asleep, and placed them in the basket, arranging them side by side like precious cargo. Chitty in the middle, as always. She tucked the blankets around them, making sure no mosquito could reach their faces. Kneeling beside the basket, Chioma laid her head near theirs and wept. This was the kind of weeping that comes from the deepest place in a mother's soul, silent but shaking her entire body. She kissed each forehead, each tiny hand, breathing in their sweet baby smell that she knew she would carry in her heart forever. I carried you under my heart for months, she whispered between sobs. I felt every kick, every hiccup. You are my blood, my bones, my everything. But love means letting go when holding on would hurt you more. She thought of the future she was giving them. Marble floors instead of concrete, private doctors instead of overcrowded clinics, university education instead of hawking on the streets. A father who would never abandon them, who would cherish them because they were the answer to 40 years of prayer. And she thought of the future she was choosing for herself. Empty arms, endless questions from neighbors, the daily ache of missing them. But also, maybe, the quiet peace of knowing she had done something extraordinary. At 4 a.m., when the city was still sleeping, she wrapped her wrapper tightly, balanced the heavy basket on her head like a pro, and stepped into the cool night air. The journey took 2 hours, walking to the bus stop, 3 different Okadas, each driver paid with coins she'd saved for weeks. The last driver, a kind Hausa man with a gentle face, helped her carry the basket to the gates of Ikoyi when she explained it was medicine for a sick relative. The mansion loomed grand and silent in the pre-dawn darkness, its white walls glowing softly under security lights. Chioma's heart raced as she approached the massive front door, polished wood that probably cost more than her entire life's earnings. She lowered the basket carefully, arranging it perfectly on the top step. She adjusted the blankets one last time, making sure the note was visible. The boys stirred slightly but settled again, tiny chests rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Chioma knelt. This was goodbye. She touched each face again, her tears falling onto the blankets. Chitty, Chike, Chima, she named them silently in her heart. Grow strong. Be kind. Know that somewhere, a woman loves you more than life itself. Every good thing that happens to you, every laugh, every achievement, every happy day, know that it came from a mother's sacrifice. She pressed her lips to each forehead in turn, lingering longest on Chima, the quiet one who had always seemed to understand her most. Then, with a strength she didn't know she had, she stood, turned, walked away. Each step felt like tearing flesh from bone. She didn't look back, couldn't look back, afraid that one more glimpse would break her resolve. By the time she reached the gate, her legs were shaking. The security guard, moved by her earlier tears and story, looked away as she passed, giving her the dignity of private grief. The journey home was a blur of tears and Okada wind. When she finally collapsed onto her empty mat, the room felt cavernous without the soft baby sounds. Chioma curled into a ball and cried until her body had no more tears to give. This was the kind of crying that changes a person forever, raw, primal, cleansing. As dawn broke over Lagos, painting the sky soft pink and gold, Chioma lay exhausted but strangely peaceful. She had lost everything, but she had also given the greatest gift one human being can give another: family to a man who had none, a future to children who deserved it, and redemption to a debt of kindness 10 years in the making. Across the city, in a mansion filled with sorrow, her 3 perfect sons slept peacefully in their basket, waiting for the man whose life they were about to transform forever. Chioma closed her eyes, imagining Emika's face when he found them. "He will cry," she whispered to the empty room. "But they will be tears of joy. And that makes every tear I've shed tonight worth it." In the deepest part of her broken heart, a tiny seed of hope took root. That one day, somehow, she would see her boys again. That one day, they would know her sacrifice. That one day, love would circle back and make them all whole. Until then, she would carry the weight of this night for the rest of her life. The most painful, most beautiful thing she had ever done. A mother's ultimate act of love. The morning of his 40th birthday broke clear and golden over Lagos. Emeka Nwankwo woke before the sun, as he had for weeks, his sleep fractured by dreams of empty nurseries and departing wives. He lay in the vast bed alone, staring at the ceiling fan turning slow circles, its hum the only sound in the room. 40 years. For decades of survival, triumph, and loss. He felt older than the city itself. He rose quietly, showered in cold water to shock the heaviness from his bones, and dressed for the day he had dreaded. A simple navy agbada, no embroidery, no celebration. A board meeting had been scheduled months ago, major investors flying in from Dubai and London to discuss a new Pan-African tech hub. Work was the one place pain couldn't follow him completely. He would go, shake hands, sign papers, and pretend 40 was just another number. Downstairs, the mansion was unnaturally quiet. He had given the staff the day off, no need for forced happy birthdays or sympathetic glances. Only the head driver and 2 security men remained on duty. Emeka picked up his briefcase and took one last look at himself in the foyer mirror, his tired eyes and lined face showing the weight of the years, and headed for the front door. That's when he heard it. A soft, muffled sound, almost like a kitten mewing. He paused, hand resting on the ornate brass handle. The sound came again, 3 tiny, distinct cries, rising and falling like a little symphony. Emeka's heart skipped a beat. He opened the door slowly, half expecting to find a stray cat that had wandered in overnight. Instead, on the top step of the marble staircase, bathed in the soft glow of early sunrise, sat a large woven basket lined with bright Ankara fabric. Inside were 3 babies. 3 perfect, living, breathing baby boys. They were bundled snugly in soft blankets, their identical faces turned toward the light, tiny fists waving as they cried together. Hungry, confused, but strong. Their skin glowed with that newborn softness, cheeks round and healthy, dark hair curling slightly at the tops of their heads. Emeka froze. The world shrank to just the basket and the unbelievable miracle it held. He dropped his briefcase. It hit the marble with a loud thud, papers scattering everywhere, but he didn't even notice. He fell to his knees on the cold step, hands trembling as he reached out. The closest baby, later he would name him Obinna, stopped crying the moment Emeka's shadow fell over him, staring up with wide, dark eyes that seemed to look right into his soul. Emeka's breath caught. A white envelope lay tucked beneath the blanket, simple handwriting visible, a gift from heaven for a kind soul. He didn't open it yet. He couldn't. Tears, hot, sudden, uncontrollable, filled his eyes and spilled over. 40 years of prayer, 40 years of ache, 40 years of empty arms. And now, on the morning he had dreaded most, God had answered with a gift beyond his wildest dreams. 3 sons. He reached in with shaking hands and lifted the first baby, Obinna, pressing him gently to his chest. The child was warm, solid, real. His tiny heart beat fast against Emeka's. The baby instinctively searched for milk, letting out a soft whimper. Emeka sobbed aloud. Not quiet tears this time. Great, wrenching sobs that echoed across the silent compound. He rocked the baby, kissing his soft forehead over and over. "My son," he whispered, voice breaking. "My son, you're home. You're finally home." One by one, he lifted the others. Okechukwu, then Alisa, until he sat on the cold marble steps cradling all three against him, their small weight the most precious burden he had ever carried. They quieted in his arms, sensing safety, sensing love long stored and waiting. The security men emerged from the gatehouse, drawn by his crying. They stopped in shock at the sight, the billionaire chief on his knees, tears streaming down his face, holding three infants like they were the rarest treasures on earth. "Sir," one ventured, "should we call the police? An ambulance?" Emeka shook his head fiercely, clutching the boys closer. "No," he managed, voice thick with emotion. "No police. No questions. These are my sons. God sent them. Cancel everything. The meeting, the flights, all of it. Bring formula, diapers, blankets, everything babies need." Now, the men scrambled to obey, phones already to their ears. Emeka stayed on the steps long after the sun rose fully, rocking his sons, whispering promises into their tiny ears. "I waited 40 years for you," he told them, tears falling onto their blankets. "I prayed every night. I cried every birthday. I thought God had forgotten me. But he was preparing you. 3 perfect miracles for this exact morning." He opened the note at last, reading it through blurred vision. A gift from heaven for a kind soul. He pressed it to his lips, sobbing again. "Whoever you are," he whispered to the unknown giver, "God will bless you beyond measure. You have given me life again." The compound buzzed with urgent, joyful activity. Staff recalled, drivers sent to the best baby stores in Lagos, pediatricians summoned from the finest hospitals. Emeka refused to let go of the boys, even to walk inside. A maid brought blankets. He wrapped them carefully and carried all 3 into the mansion himself, up the grand staircase, straight to the nursery that had stood empty for so long. He laid them gently in the crib, side by side, just as they had been in the basket, and stood watching them breathe, afraid to blink in case they vanished. Hours passed. Doctors arrived, examined them. Healthy, approximately 6 to 8 weeks old, well cared for, no signs of neglect. Identical triplets. Rare. Miraculous. Emeka listened in a daze, nodding, signing whatever forms were needed. When the last doctor left, he locked the nursery door, pulled the rocking chair close to the crib, and sat vigil. The boys slept now, exhausted from their journey and the excitement. Emeka reached in and touched each tiny hand, letting their fingers curl instinctively around his. "I don't know where you came from," he whispered, voice raw from crying. "I don't know who loved you enough to give you up so you could have a better life. But I promise you this, I will love you 3 times as much. I will be your father in every way that matters. You will never know lack, never know abandonment, never know the pain of an empty home." He bowed his head over the crib and wept again. This time tears of overwhelming gratitude, of joy so intense it hurt. 40 years of sorrow ended in one unforgettable morning. As the sun rose over Lagos, spilling warm light through the nursery windows onto 3 sleeping babies and 1 amazed father, Emeka Nwankwo realized something huge. Miracles don't always show up when we expect them. Sometimes, they come just when we've almost given up hope. Sometimes, they arrive in woven baskets on marble steps. Sometimes, they come with 3 tiny heartbeats whispering, "You're not alone anymore. You never will be again." In that quiet, sacred moment, with his sons breathing softly beside him, Emeka finally grasped the full meaning of his name. Emeka, God has done great things. And truly, he had. The first weeks after the triplets arrived were a wild mix of exhaustion, wonder, and a joy so deep it left Emeka a bit scared. Sleep? What's that? The nursery became his whole world. 3 cribs lined up like precious altars, monitors beeping softly, the air filled with the scent of baby powder and warm milk. Obinna, Okechukwu, and Alice awoke every couple of hours, their cries overlapping in a symphony that would have once terrified him, but now felt like the sweetest music ever. Emeka learned everything on the fly. How to test formula temperature on his wrist, how to burp a baby without getting drenched in spit up, spoiler, he often failed, and how to change 3 diapers in a row while singing off-key Igbo lullabies to keep them calm. His fancy agbadas were swapped for simple t-shirts stained with milk, and his once manicured hands now bore tiny scratches from those little fingernails. He canceled all business trips. Board meetings shifted to video calls from the nursery floor, with Emeka rocking a baby in one arm while discussing Billionaire projections. Investors smiled indulgently at the sudden cries in the background. "Chief, you get Peking now?" And he beamed with pride that he couldn't hide. "Yes," he'd say, his voice thick with emotion. "3 boys. Triplets. God has been good. But 3 infants? That was a lot to handle." The nannies he hired at first, experienced women from top agencies, were great at their jobs, but felt a bit too clinical. They followed schedules and changed diapers like pros, but Emeka wanted warmth and love for his miracle sons, not just care. One evening, after sending yet another nanny packing who treated the boys like tasks on a checklist, Emeka slumped in the rocking chair, all 3 babies finally asleep in their cribs. He leaned back, tears of fatigue and gratitude slipping down his cheeks. "God," he whispered into the dim room lit only by the nightlight, "thank you for them. But I can't do this alone. Send me someone with a mother's heart." 3 days later, Amaka walked in. She came through a small, discreet agency recommended by a pastor's wife. Quiet, unassuming, dressed in a simple Ankara skirt and blouse, her eyes downcast but kind. 28 and from Imo State. She had glowing references from families in Festac, where she had cared for newborns. Emeka interviewed her in the nursery while the boys napped. "Tell me why you love children," he asked, watching her face closely. Amaka glanced at the cribs, and her expression changed, softened, lit up. Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. "Because they are pure gifts. Every child deserves to feel safe and wanted from their very first breath. I know what it's like to want that for a child more than anything." Something in her voice, so raw and heartfelt, touched Emeka deeply. "You're hired," he said without hesitation. "Start today." What Emeka didn't know, what no one knew, was that Amaka was actually Chioma. She had changed her name, cut her hair shorter, worn less makeup, and even fabricated references with help from a sympathetic cousin. The grief of separation had nearly crushed her in those first weeks. Endless crying, empty arms, nightmares of her boys calling for her. But news traveled fast in Lagos. Chief Nwankwo had found triplets on his doorstep and claimed them as his own, canceling all engagements to care for them. Chioma watched from a distance at first, her heart aching with both pain and relief. Photos leaked online. Emeka carrying 3 babies in a custom carrier, beaming at a private naming ceremony. The boys looked healthy and happy, surrounded by luxury. But she could see the exhaustion in his eyes during those rare public glimpses. Whispers floated around. He was struggling alone, nannies coming and going. A mother's instinct, stronger than fear, pulled her back. She couldn't stay away forever. She needed to see them, touch them, know they were truly loved. So, she became Amaka. The first time she stepped into the nursery as the new housemaid, her legs nearly buckled. There they were, her sons, plump and beautiful at nearly 3 months old, sleeping peacefully in cribs she could never have afforded. The room smelled of expensive lotion and clean linen, toys lined the shelves, and a massive portrait of Emeka, holding all 3, already hung on the wall. Chioma, Amaka, stood frozen in the doorway, tears streaming silently down her face. Emeka found her there minutes later. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. She nodded quickly, wiping her cheeks. "Yes, sir. They're just so beautiful. Perfect." He smiled, eyes misty too. "They are my miracles." From that day on, everything changed. Amaka cared for the boys with a devotion that went beyond duty. She woke before dawn to prepare their bottles just right. Obina slightly warmer, Okachukwu needing extra burping breaks. Alisa rocked longest to sleep. She sang to them in Igbo, the same lullabies Chioma had sung in her tiny ajagunal room. She knew instinctively when a cry meant hunger, wind, or just the need for closeness. Emeka watched in awe. He started joining her during feedings, sitting in the nursery at night while she rocked one baby and he held the others. Their conversations began small, about the boys' habits, the best mosquito repellents, village remedies for colic. Then they deepened. One midnight, after a particularly tough night with all 3 boys teething, Emeka and Amaka found themselves side by side on the nursery floor, totally wiped out, but feeling a sense of victory as the little ones finally drifted off to sleep. "You have a real gift," Emeka said softly. "It's not just about skill, it's love. A mother's love, you know." Amaka felt a tightness in her chest. She looked away, tears welling up. "I get what it's like to love kids deeply," she whispered. "To want the absolute best for them, no matter what it takes. Emeka turned to her, searching her eyes. You talk like someone who's carried that weight. She nodded, unable to find her voice. He didn't push further, but from that night on, a quiet bond started to grow between them. Amaka watched Emeka with her boys and saw what she had hoped for, a dad completely devoted to them. He read them stories in his deep voice, even though they were too young to really get it. Tales of Anansi the spider and the wise tortoise. Every night, he prayed over them, long prayers filled with gratitude that often ended with tears. He learned to braid their tiny curls with gentle fingers, even singing off-key to keep them still. And the boys thrived. They began to smile, first at Amaka, whose face they somehow recognized on a deep level, then at Emeka, whose voice had become their safe haven. Chioma lived in a mix of daily torment and daily joy. Torment because she couldn't claim them, couldn't say, "I am your mother," when they reached for her. Joy because they were safe, adored, and growing strong in a home filled with love. Some nights, after Emeka went to bed, she would sit by their cribs and weep silently, stroking their cheeks, whispering, "Mama is here. Mama never left you, not in my heart." But she also noticed Emeka's loneliness. The way he watched families in the park with a quiet longing. The way he held the boys as if afraid they might vanish. The way he prayed not just for their health, but for the strength to be enough for them alone. One evening, as rain softly drummed on the mansion roof and the boys slept soundly after their baths, Emeka found Amaka in the nursery, humming softly while folding tiny clothes. He stood in the doorway, watching her, something new in his eyes. Admiration, gratitude, and the first stirrings of something deeper. "You've given me more than just a job," he said quietly. "You've given me hope that I can do this, that they will know love like a mother's, even if—" He trailed off, emotion choking him. Amaka turned, her eyes glistening. "They already know it, sir, because you love them with everything you have. And love like that, it fills every empty space." Their eyes met and held. In that moment, two wounded hearts recognized each other. Emeka saw a woman whose gentle spirit was healing his home. Chioma saw the man who had kept his promise to love her sons beyond measure. Neither knew the full truth yet, but fate, having woven their lives together through kindness years ago, was pulling them closer still. The nursery, once a room filled with ghosts and broken dreams, was now alive with soft breathing, warm light, and the quiet, growing connection between a father finding his purpose and a hidden mother watching her greatest sacrifice bloom into the family she had always prayed her children would have. And in the deepest part of the night, when the house was asleep, Chioma would stand over the cribs and whisper the same prayer every time. "Thank you, God, for letting me stay close. Thank you for letting me see them happy. And please, one day, let there be a way for truth to bring us all together without breaking what you've built." The boys stirred in their sleep, tiny smiles flickering as if, even in dreams, they felt both parents watching over them. A father who had waited 40 years, a mother who had given everything, and three little boys whose hearts somehow already knew they were loved beyond measure by both. A complete family. Years flowed like the gentle current of the Lagos Lagoon, steady, life-giving, washing away old pains and bringing new joys in their wake. Emeka and Amaka married quietly 6 months after she entered his home. No grand society wedding this time. Just a simple ceremony in the mansion garden at sunset. Fairy lights twinkling in the palm trees. A small gathering of family and close friends, the triplets, now sturdy 1-year-olds, carried down a flower-strewn path as ring-bearers in tiny white agbatas. Emeka's mother wept openly, pressing Amaka's hands between hers and calling her Nwm Oma, my good daughter. Chioma's own mother, invited secretly as a distant relative, sat in the back row, tears streaming as she watched the woman who had sacrificed everything become the wife of the man who cherished her children. Emeka stood before Amaka under a canopy of bougainvillea, his voice thick with emotion as he spoke his vows. "You came into my home as help," he said, eyes shining. "But you healed my heart. You showed me that family isn't just blood, it's love chosen every day. I promise to love you, honor you, and build this life with you until my last breath." Amaka, Chioma, could barely speak through her tears. "I promise," she whispered, "to love you and these boys with all that I am. To make this house a home forever." They exchanged rings, simple gold bands engraved inside with the date the basket was found, and kissed as the triplets gurgled happily in their grandmother's arms. That night, after the guests left and the boys were sound asleep in their nursery, Emeka carried his new wife over the threshold of their master bedroom. They made love slowly, reverently, sometimes with tears in their eyes. Tears for the roads that brought them together, for the miracles that wove their fates. Chioma never told him the truth. Not in that first year. Not in the second. She held on to the secret like a sacred flame, warm and bright, but risky if mishandled. She watched her sons grow under Emeka's devoted care, knowing that revealing she was their biological mother could shatter the perfect world they had built. The boys called her Mama, reaching for her with total trust, while they called Emeka Daddy, giggling and stretching their arms wide. To disrupt that, to risk confusion or pain, felt unthinkable. So she loved them doubly, once as the mother who carried them, and once as the woman who chose to stay. And Emeka loved her more deeply with each passing year. He noticed how the boys calmed instantly in her arms, how she knew without being told when one of them was coming down with a fever. She sang the same Igbo lullabies his own mother used to sing. Sometimes, he caught her staring at the triplets with a look that went beyond ordinary affection, tears in her eyes. He held her close, grateful for whatever private pain made her love his sons so fiercely. The family grew. 2 years after the wedding, Amaka gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. Kamsi, as I asked of God, and Kosi, as God willed. The labor was long, but Emeka never left her side, holding her hand, praying aloud, and crying when the first cry echoed through the hospital suite. When the second twin arrived minutes later, he fell to his knees beside the bed, sobbing into Amaka's shoulder. 2 more miracles, he whispered. You keep giving me miracles. Chioma held her new babies, hers without question, hers without secrecy, and felt her heart expand beyond what she thought was possible. The triplets, now 3, peered curiously at their new siblings, with Obinna solemnly declaring, "My baby," as he touched Kamsi's tiny hand. 3 years later, another set of twins arrived. Ifyananya, Love, and Ifani. Nothing is impossible with God. The mansion rang with even more laughter, more chaos, more life. 7 children in total. 3 boys who came in a basket, 4 more who arrived the usual way, all raised as full siblings, all cherished equally. The house that once echoed with loneliness now overflowed with noise and love. Mornings were a joyful whirlwind. Emeka in the kitchen trying to flip pancakes while toddlers climbed his legs. Amaka nursing the youngest twins while directing the older ones to brush their teeth. School runs involved a custom van with 7 car seats. Evenings were filled with family devotions in the chapel, 7 little voices joining their parents in prayer and song. Weekends meant trips to the village to see grandparents, beach days at Tarkwa Bay, and Christmas parties where the kids performed dances they had practiced for weeks. Emeka's wealth kept growing, but he redirected it with new purpose. He built a foundation in honor of the triplets, scholarships for abandoned children, support for single mothers, fertility grants for couples struggling as he once had. He and Amaka opened a home for pregnant women in crisis, offering medical care, counseling, and options, never judgment. Chioma worked there anonymously at first, then openly, helping young women make tough choices with dignity and love. The boys grew up strong and kind. Obinna, the leader, serious like his father, but with a gentle heart. Okachukwu, the adventurer, always climbing trees and asking questions. Alisa, the quiet dreamer, who drew beautiful pictures and loved books. The younger twins brought new energy. Kamsi's calm wisdom, Kosi's fierce determination, Ifyananya's infectious laughter, Ifani's endless curiosity. They called Emeka Daddy and Amaka Mama without distinction. And on quiet nights, when the house finally settled down, Emeka and Amaka would stand together in the nursery, now a playroom, with cribs replaced by beds, and watch their children sleep. One night, on the 10th anniversary of the day the basket appeared, Emeka wrapped his arms around his wife from behind. 10 years, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. 10 years since God answered 40 years of prayer with 3 perfect boys on my doorstep. And then he gave me you. And 4 more. I was a broken man, Amaka. You made me whole. Chioma leaned back against him, tears silently falling. She almost told him then. The words rose in her throat. I was the one who left them. They are mine too, ours from the beginning. But she looked at the peaceful faces of their 7 children, at the life they had built on love and trust, and the words stayed locked inside. Some truths, she had learned, are too heavy to speak if they might break what is perfect. Instead, she turned in his arms and kissed him softly. You were never broken, she whispered. You were waiting, and God used me to bring you what your heart needed most. Emeka held her tighter, tears streaming down his cheeks. I don't know what I did to deserve this, he said, but I will spend the rest of my life thanking him and thanking you. Outside, Lagos sparkled below them. Millions of lives, millions of stories. Inside their home, one story had come full circle. A boy who lost everything on a dusty hill rose to conquer worlds, only to find that true wealth was the laughter of children and the love of a woman who chose him every day. A mother who gave away her heart in 3 pieces watched it return to her sevenfold, wrapped in love she could never have imagined. And 7 children, 3 who arrived as miracles in a basket, for who came later, grew up knowing only one truth. They were wanted. They were cherished. They were home. In the end, no one needed to know the full secret. Love had already told the whole story, and they lived, not just happily, but completely, forever after. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more amazing tales.